Okay. Now we have the awkward moments where we wait for YouTube
We're
to
just
come on.
waiting.
And there
Yeah.
it is. I can see it. Welcome, everybody, to the Making Awesome podcast, season 2, episode 39. And we've got a new friend of mine. This is actually technically our first time ever talking. But of course, a lot of us in the industry know you, Ty. Give us the Backstreet Boys, the who you are, the where you from, the what you did, and as long as you love me.
Who am I? So I'm Ty. I own a company called Table Flip Foundry. We have kind of like a wide range of like services that I do within like the tabletop and 3D printing community. I live in Omaha, Nebraska, but I'm from California originally. Um, that's me. That's what I do. As far as my company, like I started off with a little Etsy store. I'm sure like a lot of people, they get their printer and they're like, I might be able to make money doing this. Well, by that time I had 20 printers. And so I was like, well, I have an investment this large. I
Right.
should probably like maybe try something. And I had a little bit of Blender knowledge, and I had like I can't sculpt, but I can do renders and I can do all this stuff. And I was like, I'll take a shot at this. I'm really good friends with a couple of artists, Lions Tower, Adventure Guild, and Bellrock Art. Those were like my first two pre-support like clients. And so they're like, yeah, you can sell our stuff. Go ahead and start your store. And then that went from me thinking I'll make like date night money, like 20-60 bucks a week, something like that. We'll take date night. And in the first month it was like I was working a full-time job, and then Etsy was another full-time job. I didn't realize like the amount of work.
Yeah, yeah,
And
it does turn out like that. Who knew
it,
that Etsy requires a ton of customer service
it's a
support
ton
that
of
people
work.
don't
Yeah.
know?
And it did better than I expected, which is
Okay.
really nice. And I got pretty lucky, and I was doing things slightly different than everybody else. And so that went on for a while, and it started to plateau. And it was sort of like I plateaued because I had no more hours in the day.
Hmm.
And so I quit my full-time job in order to just make a run at trying to run this business, which is super scary. And Etsy grew a little more, and then I started to bring in a couple more clients, and one guy introduced me to another guy, and then it just kind of grew from there. And it's I don't it's not giant or anything, but I work really hard to try to grow and expand like everything that we do. So it's very wide reaching in this community, both 3D printing and tabletop gaming.
I have noticed that you have a pretty large community. Do you know offhand how big your Discord is? Because it is
I think
substantial.
just shy of like 700 people, I think now. Part of that is a lot of hard work on our end.
Hmm.
So I'm not alone. I have like a small staff of people that work with me. And then also, so here's the fun story. Here's the how did it all happen? Um, I I told you a little story about how I received a message from 3D Printing Pro, and he shot me a message, and he's like, "Hey," kind of gave me a little bit of advice because I was just new and I was starting out, and I thanked him and I said, "Hey, I'm just trying to get my feet on the ground. Like, give me a little time and I'll get caught up." And then he messaged me about a week later. He's like, you need to contact Danny, the 3D printing DM. He's like, you
Yep.
need to contact Danny. I think he needs somebody. And I said, really? He's like, yeah, tell Danny that I told you to contact him. So he sort of gave me his little stamp of like approval. He messaged Danny, I messaged Danny, and then a little bit, let's say a week or two later, I got the job to do the Uncharted Lands Kickstarter, which is
Nice.
their most, Lost Adventures most recent Kickstarter.
Right.
And then it just sort of started from there, which was just like little bit. So once that landed, I was like, I can't do this alone. This is way too big. Started talking to some people. I was introduced to somebody on their team, Carrie. She's on our server. Everybody will know her as Kraz C, or the Crazy Mad Scientist. So when we started the Discord channel, she and I were just like constantly talking to people, constantly active, and trying to help people and troubleshoot. I met her and this is where the cones started. I met her through Danny, and
Danny's a good guy. He's actually
he's
relatively local to me. We're supposed to get together at some point. It is the stars have not yet aligned for that to occur, but there are some really hilarious ideas that we have to do together, and it's just he's like 45 minutes or an hour away from me, so he's pretty close.
yeah. So not to go off on like a little Danny tangent, but literally, I mean, I can't speak highly enough for the guy. Like,
Yeah, he's so
piece of
kind.
gold. Like, he and I have become I'd say friends. If I could say so, I can say we've become friends over the time we've started working together. So amazing. But I had this idea for
And
the
oh yeah,
cone.
hey Danny, if you're
Yeah,
watching, when the hell are you going to schedule your episode?
get on the show. So I had this idea for the cones, and I'll get into more detail about it, but I literally debated Danny for an hour. Like, I said, hey, I've got this idea. Do you think it's got merit? And he's like, no, that won't work. And I was like, no, I think you're thinking about it wrong. You've got to think about it like this. And I had like a little thing I slapped together in Fusion, and it was just like a demo. He's like, no, that just won't work. It doesn't fit this way. I was like, no, you're thinking about it the old way. You have to think about it the new way. And by about the end of the hour, he's like, oh, I get it. He's like, that could work. Let me know how it goes. I was like, okay. And so I was working on it, and I was like coming across some problems. And he's like, who might be really helpful to you is Carrie. And so he's like, she's on our test print team. She's very analytical. She's got a degree in chemistry, and she just approaches things very scientifically. And so I messaged her, and I was like, hey, Danny said that you might be interested in or helpful in this. Like, what do you think? And like, first few words out of her mouth, I was like, that's what my problem is right now. And I was like, we need to keep talking. We spent a couple hours on a chat, and then sort of like the rest is history after that. So the community sort of started with her and I just sort of like opening this thing up and
Hmm.
trying to help. And then later we finally released the cones after a huge amount of testing. And then since then, things have changed dramatically. Like, I'm excited to talk today because from the day I can like had the idea to now, everything is different. Like, I started off with one idea. Now it's completely different.
That's kind of the goal of an idea, though. We work a lot with inventors that will come to us with an idea. By the time they are through, the idea has morphed and changed, right? I feel like good product development, and what you have is a product, you're just choosing to open source and give it away for free. But
Yeah.
your product, if it doesn't change with the needs of the market, doesn't change with the needs of the community, it is destined to fail
Yeah,
because it will be
exactly.
left behind, a la MakerBot.
Yeah.
We're not against naming and shaming on this podcast, and I've done that plenty of times in terms of MakerBot, so I don't particularly care. Um, and is it true that in order to get the cones, you must first build a civilization?
It's all about the cones.
It's all about the
It's all
cones.
about the cones.
I do have to ask
Yeah.
because even like so we have an editor for the YouTube channel who makes the thumbnails and all that. He's like,
Right.
"This is a Cones of Dunshire reference, right?" I said, "Oh shit, I bet it is." So the first thumbnail that we sent to you had you as the humble farmer,
Right.
but then we're like, "No, no, no, the architect." And we
Yeah.
decided the architect was better. Is it actually a Parks and Recs Cones of Dunshire
It's
reference?
absolutely not. Sadly, I was informed of the reference. I didn't get the reference at first either. Somebody shot me one of the Discord memes, and I was just like,
You had the
like, of
chance.
course.
You had the chance to write the story the way you wanted to, and you still
I
chose
know, I know,
honesty.
no. Unfortunately, so no, it was function over fun first, and then and then it turned out to be like a happy accident. But yeah, it was the only way that I could make it work. I went through like 12 iterations, and by the time I was done, it was just cones. We did play I'm friends with Keaton from Velrock Art, and
Mhm.
I said, man, these kind of look like teeth. I was like, can we turn this into a mimic?
Yeah,
Like,
like a mimic. Yep.
and so he did one, but then I was like, scientifically, there's a lot of different forces being involved by adding cosmetics to it. And I was like, it has to be symmetric. It's got to be sterile, so to speak. Like, and so we couldn't do that. And then I was I get on my Discord server when I'm writing stuff or writing content or need, just collaborative help figuring out stuff. And so I jumped on a live stream and I was just like, it's time to release these. We don't know what to call them. I
Right.
have to write documentation. And so we just sat down like 4 or 5 people on our stream and people were just throwing out ideas and throwing out ideas. And so it's like word association and all of this stuff. And somebody said cones, and I can't remember who. I wish I could credit whoever came up with the name. Maybe I did, maybe somebody else did, but then somebody threw out the cones of calibration. I was like, it's an item. It's like a tabletop RPG item. And then the rest of it just sort of laid out like the way we did documentation. I feel like, and this is no slight against anybody, as far as their calibration type.
Right. Yeah.
But you can go to like Anycubic's page or a Mary Labs page, and it's just a very clinical, like cut and dry. This is what you look for here. This is what it's just very plain or bland.
Well, and like, especially with Toontown, right? And that's the Amerilabs Toontown.
Mhm.
That thing is a bitch to read.
It's hard.
And I've printed them. I've got tons of them sitting over there when I was looking at dialing in casting resin, which, as far as I'm concerned, might as well just be a dark art, because I got beautiful test prints off of it for like Toontown, and I did a cone or two at some point on it. They disintegrate over time because it's casting resin.
It's casting resin, yeah.
But then you go to print regular parts and they still fail. So just
we can touch on that today. This is where I started with one idea and I landed where I'm at today. And weird enough, my knowledge has changed dramatically. Like I'm not an expert, but my level of knowledge just from the cones and troubleshooting and answering questions and figuring out and thinking critically, I can help you with that, or I can help everybody with that. Right. Because of the cones. Without them, I probably wouldn't have figured out some of this stuff. So we can talk about some of that for sure. But yeah, it was just a collaborative thing where I think I think there could be fun or gamification of like the whole process, right? The hobby can be, we all know, doesn't matter if it's FDM, resin, any of it.
Right.
There can be a huge amount of frustration, right?
There is, right? And I don't, we've been looking at making this part of like my OBS where I could have the resin is toxic thing come up on the screen with the sound, the boom, 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 as I say it. But I just haven't gotten around to it.
Resin, yeah.
Because it is. And so much of the community doesn't take resin personally as seriously as I think they should. And because the printers are so cheap, and I'm not going to say affordable, because a lot of the really, really, cheap ones are just straight cheap.
It's not worth it. Yeah.
Right. Like Elegoo Mars 2 Pro, great printer, like $200. Yeah. The Creality Hallett Sky for $100, not a great machine. Their FEP is just, it is on the brink of disaster when you buy it brand new. Now, if you want to go replace the FEP and all that and deal with that BS, go ahead. But there becomes a limit here where, similar to this stuff, right? I know Underwriter Laboratories UL is working on a standard for air quality in 3D printing, because
that'd be great.
There is stuff that gets released during the print. Now, my personal feeling is it's likely not that big of a deal unless you're standing above it, inhaling big breaths.
Like
right?
all the time, yeah.
Yeah, if you can't feel the wind from the printer, most likely you're not dealing with a high concentration of particulate. But of course there's going to be particulate. With resin, it smells, and it's got a bad smell. So you know that,
if I'm smelling it from here, that there's some particles of something getting in there.
We got Ostrike in the comments saying, I'm not willing to try SLA. It's not a cost thing. It's the toxic mess that is the deal breaker. And dude, like, I have all but written off Facebook at this point, because I have been banned from multiple Facebook groups for talking about toxicity of resin.
Yeah.
And the bans were for resin is not toxic. And my response is, then drink it. If it's not toxic, then drink it.
Prove it.
Because it will kill you. And if it doesn't kill you, you're going to go meet my girlfriend, and she doesn't want to deal with you. My girlfriend's an ICU nurse.
I figured, yeah.
And she doesn't want to deal with that shit. That's ER stuff where they pump your stomach.
Yeah.
When you do a toxicity of UV photopolymer resins, yeah, that's a whole different story.
I think Goobertown, I don't remember the
What a
gentleman's name.
golden voice that guy has, though.
Right,
Can
yeah.
we talk about that for just a second? He is like a top tier level guest for me,
Yeah.
not because I know what to ask him, but simply because his mic is perfect for his voice.
But so he's a chemist, right?
Yeah.
And I think he did a video. It's hard because it's such a like a scientific video. It can be really difficult to like watch, but he does a whole breakdown of all of it. It's like clear as day. So admittedly, like everybody has to make choices about how they choose to like address it, right? Some people on Facebook say it's not toxic, so they make their choices about how they handle it.
Yeah.
My safety precautions are not like extensive. I don't wear gloves when I go in there. I just have like a workflow where I
You
don't touch
should
it.
wear gloves.
You should. I'm
I
just saying.
understand that once you get to a
You
certain
should.
point, you have
Yeah.
a workflow that means that you drastically reduce your potential risk to resin, right?
Right.
You
Yeah.
don't touch the parts come off. You
Yeah.
probably rip the flex plate into the vat with a scraper, or you're scraping off the parts
I'm sure that's
directly.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tweezers for everything that don't touch resin other than the tips. So like I understand, and
Yeah.
it is toxic. When I first started, I would get like a little bit of resin or even just isopropyl with resin saturation. And it would get it like on my fingertips and I wouldn't wash my fingers.
Mhm.
And for like months, my fingers would itch.
Yep. Yeah,
Just for months.
it's an allergic reaction. We
Yeah.
had a chemist of our own, Paul, who actually made the cancel objects plugin for Octoprint. If you guys use that plugin, that was all Paul. And we cut it out of the main video because there was a video that I wanted to make, which was I would go get like a pork shoulder or a pork butt, something with some substance to it, and put resin on it. He said you won't have an effect because the reason that we get allergic reactions is due to blood flow. He said, so unless you can put blood back into this carcass and get it to pump, you're not going to get the result you're looking for. He said it will
Right.
probably do something, but it's not going to be the crazy thing that you expect. But we've all seen the horror stories of it. Of people, having prints that pop on them. Recently, we covered prints that are not hollowed, and they are filled with raw resin that over time will leak and they'll get all over things that people don't understand. And when you deal with the cones, right, when you're dealing with getting your exposure proper, and you've gone through that level of calibration, I believe that you've hit a certain tier of, I kind of understand what I'm getting myself into, right?
Yeah.
Do you agree with me there? Like, once you go through the point of getting your printer properly calibrated, you seem to understand the risks and are taking a reasonable amount of risk to yourself.
I would agree entirely. Like there is as with FDM, sorry, I didn't realize my phone wasn't muted. As FDM, you see a new user, you know exactly what problems they're going to create for themselves, you know exactly what questions they're about to ask. Like we all go through the same problem. We all print the benchy, we all try to print the articulating octopus, and it doesn't work, and we all try these. We all go through the same.
Why do people print benchies in resin? Like, that is, it's
in
not
resin,
designed for resin.
Resin, I don't know, but on FDM, we all kind of go through that. But in resin, it's the same thing. It's like people get it, they'll run the test print that comes on the USB stick that comes with it. It'll print perfect, but they don't realize that it's been designed to print perfect, so it makes the product look better. So when it comes from the manufacturer, they have an overexposed on the build plate, no supports, like the most successful print you could possibly have, so that you get it and you go, oh, this is great. This experience is amazing. I have this figured out. And then you try your own and you realize like you have nothing figured out. And then you start that process. And then by the time you realize what you need to know, which is I need to understand exposure, and I need to understand settings. And then you get, instead of like going, this is want to hear a controversial opinion. I want to preface this because I don't want to say the wrong thing without the wrong context or without the right context. I love Lychee Slicer. I use it exclusively for all of our pre-support work. I shout from the rooftops. I make fun. I joke with, but I make fun of people who are still using Chitu bucks. Like I love Lychee Slicer, but the one thing that I would say publicly and openly is that community profiles are detrimental to people's learning, because there are so many variables. When somebody says they got the right settings, but they don't understand why they got there, and they put them up for people to get, nobody understands whether or not that person knew what they were doing. And so they take it as gospel, they put it in their printer, and then they're even more confused. They're like, oh, I got all my settings right. It's like, did you though? So once they get past the community profiles, the spreadsheets on Google Docs and all of that stuff, and they get to the point where they're like, I need to go get a part and I need to learn how to do this myself, I'd say you're absolutely right. By the time they've got through like A to B to C, and they get all the way to the cones, and it's like, now they've got to have, in order to get there, you had to be here. So they have to have that understanding of safety measures. Like everybody talking. I mean, do I wear a respirator when I'm working on my stuff? No, but should you? Yes. That's the decision I make. But you should
I'm the same
probably
way.
do it, right?
I don't do the respirator as much as I should. However,
you should.
I have pretty hardcore VOC filters in my room. I filter the air.
Yeah. I have a room dedicated, sealed off from the rest of the house with fans that blow outside. Like, I've taken precautions, but when I'm in there, I don't,
well, and I like, should. Here's the deal. And we've got a few people in the comments that are like, I don't have a garage to print in, so I'm not going to get into resin printing. I'm going to be straight here and say Soraya Tech has some of the least offensive resin that I've ever worked with. I say that I just got in some resin for testing, and I haven't like given it the yield sniff test to see how rough it is. But it is, I find Soraya Tech to be more of a sweet smell, which tenacious. Is nowhere near as offensive as something like the Elegoo resin, which is just bitter. It smells bitter.
I want to eat tenacious resin. You don't do that. Don't do that. But I smell it, like it smells.
I don't like the smell of it. I don't like the smell of it personally. Smell of it.
I don't stick my nose in it or anything, but every time I have to mix them in some other resin, I'm like, this. But it smells great.
I would say for those that don't have a garage, the next best place to print is a spare bathroom. The reason is bathrooms normally have vents to exterior. Yeah. And if you don't have that, I'm sorry. One, well, you're going to have a mold problem, but two, just dealing with smell. You could put it in a window. I saw the new Saturn II has a port for a fan on it. I'm still not convinced that it's good enough.
They have the internal carbon filter as well. So they have a port for the fan, but also that filter. I don't know how well it works.
Yeah, carbon filters, as someone
they're
taking
steps.
I'm working on a project that I will tell it to you after off stream.
Yeah, you can't talk about it yet.
It's a personal thing. We're going to be retailing it, so I don't want to give too much out. But cool. The even reasonably thick carbon filters get rid of the smell. They don't actually really take care of the VOC. Yeah. So it's a misnomer. You need carbon with HEPA generally to do it. But for the size and stuff that most hobbyists need, you can't have both. Actually, you can't have HEPA, period, because HEPA filters need to be relatively substantially thick.
Gotcha.
So talk to me a bit how, because you went from, you said one printer to 20, and this was all on Etsy. So can you talk about what you were doing originally with Etsy that got you to grow to that point?
Okay, so it's we're like backwards there. So I got my first 3D. I'm a maker. If I can build something, fix something, like I want to tinker, like that's just who I am. And so I got my first 3D printer. It was an Ender 3. And I figured out what I figured out on the day, and I got my first print going. I was like, that was so much fun. And then I waited 6 hours in order for the print to finish. And I was like, well, I sure wish I could have had that fun for 6 hours. I only have 2 days off a week. I don't want to wait 17 hours for this print. I enjoy this process of slicing and tinkering and all that stuff. So I got on Facebook and I was like looking for, a used one or something. And I found a guy who had 2 Keedy printers. And so I worked it out, and then I had 2 more. And it was like, all of a sudden it was like, I could spend some time on the Ender. I could spend some time on this and on that. And so then I would run, like, I play, like, I 3D print for tabletop gaming. I almost don't print anything else. On occasion, I'll fix something, but for the most part, it's all tabletop gaming. So it was like Dungeons and Dragons tiles and like and all that stuff for terrain. But then I would start a print, it would be 16 hours, and I'd run all three printers and they would all be running 16 hours. It was like, same problem, right? I'm still like, I wish I could also print this other thing. And so it just sort of started from there. I'm a really obsessive hobbyist. So if I like it, it's not 100%, it's 200% in. And so I traded one, and I traded one to a guy who had the CR10S5
Mm-hmm.
and a CR10 because he couldn't get the CR10S5 to work. And so I traded one of my Kitty printers for two more printers. And then, like, well, I got this broken printer, I need to make it work. And then I learned everything about them. And then it's just like, then I got into like, manufacturers contacting me and saying, hey, we want to review you, like, I'll take a look at it. And then they would send me a broken one and I'd fix it. And so that's where it started. And then it was, well, I want to do tabletop gaming. And so it's a very obvious the difference between FDM and resin is quality, like print quality. And so I got my first photon, and then it was the same thing. It's like, well, I need 10 minis for this game, and I can only do ungodly slow, right? It was back in RGB screen days where we didn't have chromatic screens. So like 14-second layer times. And so it 9-hour prints.
I still have 4 functioning OG Marses.
Oh, do you? Yeah. So you get it. And back then it was the same
decision to buy a printer for every type of resin that we have, rather than just have 1 or 2 printers and then changing out vats. I didn't want to deal with that.
Way easier.
Because back when I got into resin printing right when the OG Mars first came out.
Okay.
And it was the Mars, a Photon, or a Prusa SL1. I said I would love a Prusa SL1. I was on the Prusa hype train at that point. Still am, by the way, even with the new price increase. Still think they're the best printers for the money period. But I said, all right, I can get 7 Elegoo Marses for the same price as an SL1. What is more valuable to me as a business? 7 or 1? So we bought 4, I think, to start with. I ended up getting a total of 8, and they've slowly just died. One of them, so we have 4 that are used, but only 3 have resin in them. One is our test machine that will burn with whatever we want. Same thing, I've got 4 Saturns. One of them is a test machine that is used specifically to dial in resins before it goes into production machines.
Gotcha.
And, we found that as soon as, well, G2 Box is garbage. Absolutely hot garbage. I was doing all of my supporting and all that inside a Prusa slicer, then in Chi2 for the slicing, and then it would go out. But as soon as I found Lychee Slicer, then of course the epiphany of UV tools, it's the cheat code for resin 3D printing. And like I believe that's even the video title is the cheat code for resin 3D printing as UV tools, because it enables step by step. I think back in the day for the OG Mars, it was Photon File Validator.
It was.
If I'm going to date myself a little bit for resin printing. But I've been in resin printing since well before that. I backed the Kubo Titan 1 on Kickstarter. That was a thing. That it was a projector, DLP projector machine, so it was huge. I've built my own resin printers before. Those didn't work and leaked.
I haven't tried that yet. I haven't gone down that road.
For as cheap as they are now, don't do it.
I'm trying to figure out how there was one guy on YouTube who did, but I'm trying to figure out how my Photon doesn't just sit in a box under my workstation and how to like bring it back out and use that machine.
I have a whole shelf
of
resin printers.
I don't know if I can. Yeah, I don't know if I can swing that.
We got a $5 super chat from Awstrike. Thank you very much for that. They're saying for miniatures, I assume 0.2 millimeter FDM can't compete with SLA on speed, but how does that level of detail and quality compare? It's not even close.
Even close.
It's not even close. So resin is normally 0.05 versus 0.2. So it is 1/4 the layer thickness. And I think really the trick to resin is that it's a liquid. And because most of us generally suck at cleaning the models 100% perfectly, you'll get a little bit of a skin of leftover resin. That tends to be like, I don't know, a very small layer of like filler primer, right? I find that no matter what I do, no matter how well tuned I've got my FDM printers, it doesn't even come close.
Yeah.
Even further, you deal with nozzle problems, right? So you can go down to a 0.2 or even a 0.1 millimeter if you have a clean room or you are a masochist, I don't know. And you can get gorgeous parts out of it. But you will start running into issues where your filament starts to work harden because it is staying inside of the heat zone so long. And yeah, I've seen like Alley Katz, formerly Geeky Faye, they did an amazing video on printing with a 0.1 millimeter nozzle and got some beautiful prints doing it.
I've seen some minis come out where I'm just like, I can't believe that's FDM, but
Yeah,
it's still, you put it next to a resin print and
but
it's
even
just
then,
100%.
the time. This is the one great thing about MSLA and why I firmly believe that MSLA is the way to go. I know for bigger machines, you kind of have to go with lasers to deal with the large like 3D systems there. The 7500 or 750 HD that they just released has a triplet of lasers to go across their massive build volume as quickly as possible. But those are fat based, so you print down into the liquid rather than pulling out of it. The MSLA, because it exposes the entire layer at once, you can print an entire bed of minis in the
Yeah.
time that you can barely maybe get one off an FDM printer.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely one benefit at the very least is increasing the amount of product is the exact same amount of the limitation on a resin printer is the height of the tallest object on the bed. And then every
Yep.
time you add a new object to an FDM, it's more of a mechanical like process where it mechanically has to go and move around and make the thing. Whereas it's
Mm-hmm.
weird enough to say it comes out physical or tangible, but in a resin printer, it's more of a digital process, right? It's just a screen showing layers by layers, but it can do the whole build plate all in one go. So a lot of people and myself included, when I do test prints, I print everything at 0.05.
Mm-hmm.
When I do production work or Etsy orders, I print at 0.025. So you're talking almost 10 times more detail from a 0.2 layer height on a resin printer to like the 0.025 that I'm printing on, I'm sorry, on an FDM on a resin printer. So it is dramatically different. And if you ever get two sitting next to each other, you'll understand it easier. You can probably find pictures on Google pretty easily of the comparison, but it's so different. Once you have one in your hand, you'd never go back.
But resin, of course, has an Achilles heel.
A couple.
The big one to me is how brittle it is. And you know what? I'm gonna show this off because I was not told that I couldn't. This came in the mail literally yesterday. It has been in the mail for almost a month now. I've got some Meyer Makes resin or Mayer or Meyer. I don't know. I've got some of their engineering resin, and this stuff is supposed to be John of Proper Printing, I think, did this for his resin printed extruder that he built for doing flexibles. He made it out of this resin. This stuff is supposed to be crazy strong, like peak or peck levels of strong.
That's crazy.
And like, okay, but it's also $140 for that bottle. So it to me, it's the brittleness. But what are some of the other Achilles heels of resin?
So obviously the toxicity, the smell,
Okay, that's fair.
the brittleness honestly is being resolved even by the opposite of commercial manufacturers. For the civilian, the civilian population can get what I can tell you what I use. It's what I would recommend, but I know there's other options out there that people really like. But I use frozen aqua 4K gray. And I found after all of the testing I've done, all of the different resins I've tried, it's like $40 a bottle. It's not the cheapest resin out there.
That's not bad.
But durability to quality was pretty good right out of the bottle. And then Soraya came out with an obsidian tenacious.
Yep.
So the thing about tenacious, regular tenacious, is that it's clear, and clear resins always have a subtle amount of light scatter.
Yep.
So there's some diffusion in the clear. So inevitably, and even if it's imperceivably, when you add, and a lot of people add tenacious to their resin, when you add clear resin to an opaque resin, you are degrading the quality that it can print. It may not be visible to the human eye, or unless you have like a really keen sense for what you're looking for, it does technically degrade it. Well, they decided to come out with an opaque tenacious. So I mix 10%, I really just eyeball it, but it's about 10% of this obsidian into the frozen aqua 4K gray. And I can literally throw minis across the room and not lose swords and not lose any, like it's really impressive what you can do without a $140 bottle of resin. Like if you need it to be perfect, if it's engineering, you know, if you're talking about a really precise part, very little warpage, where it needs to be, you know, dimensionally accurate, like perfectly, then you have to spend the money on a really high quality resin like that. But if you're just making minis, you're just a hobbyist, like you can get away with some pretty durable stuff now. Like a lot of these companies are really understanding that. So it's possible. It is still like, it's not the same as like a, what is it? A molded, like a, I don't know what they use for the plastic molds for miniatures you can buy at your hobby store. Your
ABS or polystyrene.
ABS, right? Like those you can probably drive over with a car and not really break them.
Well, it's the properties of the plastic itself, right? And photopolymer resin, a lot of people in the comments are saying, dope it with tenacious, dope it with tenacious. I get it. That's what we all do. We all dope our resin with tenacious. However, it is a process that newbies should not do.
Right.
The easiest way to do it is a pain in the ass, which is buy a 5-liter jug, buy of Soraya Tech Fast, buy a 1-liter jug of tenacious, and then dump tenacious into fast.
Just be done with it. You're
and
good.
Then mix it.
Yeah.
But that is also a $250 endeavor by the time you're done with it. And that's the printer for most people. And so I would love to see, Soraya Tech knows we do this, right? It's not like
just make it.
Just make it. Just make it pre-mixed. Charge a little bit extra for it, and I promise you people will buy it. Now, the resin I haven't tried, and I've had the Atlas guys on plenty of times, and I need to reach out and say, hey, send me some of your resin. Is the Atlas resin. I hear it's really good.
Really? Yeah, I haven't had a chance either. Only
trick
because
with it is it's in bags.
I saw that, which is cool.
There's one downside.
Yeah.
If you have to empty your tank, you can't empty it back into the bag.
Oh yeah.
So you have to, if you're someone that likes to change resins,
keep a bottle around of another resin so that you can
just go buy bottles off of Amazon that are clean.
There you go.
Right. Yeah. In my opinion, but I'm the type of person that will put resin into a vat and not ever take it out. I will, mix up my vat. So when we look at the cones, I'm seeing a couple of people have said, regarding a V2. Let me see how far back this is. Okay, so Lone Win asked, love the cones. Is there a V2 in the works? Philip McCrary said he didn't want to ask about it. Maybe you'll talk about it, but we got enough people asking, so I'm going to make you talk about it.
So let's, so here's what I'll do. I'll take you guys on a journey. Let's talk about, and I'm gonna do this. You guys might notice I have a little green screen going. I'll show you guys.
Oh shit! He's gonna play with the green screen.
I will.
We go.
Okay, so
real quick before you do that, let me remind those that are listening audio only that this is a live podcast. We stream it every single week on YouTube and Twitch. We might end up going strictly to Twitch. We'll see. So if you do want to see what Ty's about to put on the screen, make sure that you go over and watch the video. The time code should be somewhere in the 39.5-minute mark.
So I'm going to tell a story first, and then while I'm doing that, I'm going to grab it. So let me talk about the cones. I want to explain some new stuff that I know, and then we're going to talk about how that translated into a V2. So, here's sort of like the origin, like where did the idea come from? So I've said this in the video. If you've seen the video where I outline the cones, what is it? How do you use it? I kind of explained that in my opinion, if you print a calibration part and then when you're done, you look at it and you go, well, I don't know if I'm calibrated. It's a bad calibration part, right? Like if you look at it and you go, I don't know, and then you ask a bunch of people for their opinions and they give you different opinions, like the part is not good, right? The process is not good. To be fair, when I don't use the cones or I use the cones and then I need it at like further calibration, I go to the Amerilab City. I think it's the best one personally. But still, there's a level of like objectivity there. Like you could look at it, I could look at it, or subjectivity. I don't know. Well, there's opinions involved. And I was like, no, we need a way where it is yes or it is no. How can we make it yes or no? So then it's like, let's break down 3D printing to its root, right? Its root is if the print holds to the build plate, then it prints, right? That's sort of like the root of 3D printing. If it doesn't, it fails. So what are we really doing when we're exposing, right? So I've determined there's two different types of exposure. There's dimensional accuracy, where we're saying this part is supposed to be exactly this size.
Right.
And then there's also printability, right? So you can have something dimensionally accurate and then you run a pre-supported model and it doesn't work. And so that printability is, where most hobbyists need to be. The dimensional accuracy is where most businesses need to be. So I'm sure you're familiar, like I need this to be exactly this. And that's where that super high quality resin that you have comes in. But the rest of us, we probably don't need that kind of accurate. We just need it to print. We want to take our miniature or whatever, and we want to put it on the table. And if it's supposed to be 17 millimeters tall, but it's 17.1 millimeters tall, who cares, right? That's not the importance. So
yeah, for a mini, it's no big deal.
Yeah, or terrain or anything that a hobbyist is really going to be interested in until you start engineering, and then you start need to worry about that. So let's break it down. Like that was the idea. Let's break it down. Supports are where we start. Supports are what I know, but it's like we need these supports to work. So why are we messing around with like this little bit, printing it 23 degrees and then 26 degrees, and then trying to like decrypt the outcome of what this 0.01 number looks like and all that stuff? We need to know, yes or no, do the supports hold, right? Because that's going to get us a successful print. And I was like, why haven't we approached it from that way? And so my very first part was just a big circle of little teeny triangles where I was hand placing different size supports on them and then seeing what happened. And that was sort of the premise, is like, okay, I know that for my settings, I use a 0.28 tipped support. So I'm going to make sure that anything less than 0.28 fails and anything from 0.28 up succeeds in this like controlled environment. And that was the idea, is like, I know that by exposing more, I can have more success. By exposing less, I can have more failure, and I can control it, and I can predict what will happen when I do. So I line it up. I shoot my exposure way, way up, like way too high. And I go, I predict all of these are going to print. And I run the print and they do. Then I turn my exposure way down and I go, I predict that a quarter of these are going to print. And I'm pretty darn close on my prediction. And so I was like, I have to be onto something. If I can predict what's going to happen, all I need to do is tune it to a place where I'm happy with the result. And then we send that out to people and they can tune theirs to a place where they're happy with results. So I've always said, like, the idea behind it is you're not 100% there. You can get better results, but you're like 90% there. So that was the debate with Danny for an hour. It's like, no, dude, it'll never work. It just won't. You have to, some people don't use 0.28 support. Some people use 0.22. I was like, it's not about that. It's about finding the sweet spot. I'm using these numbers to help me find that sweet spot. So that was the start of it. So fast forward, we do a test. I put together a private Discord server. I invite a number of people to be test printers for this new calibration part. They've been instructed, don't talk about it. We're not sure it works yet. We don't want the public to know about it. So we get, I think, maybe 10 or 12 people. I've outlined them in the documentation. So if you want to know who who helped test it. In the documentation with the cones, I make sure everybody has all of their names and all that stuff. So
Right.
a relatively small group of people, but the goal was all different ranges of experience, from somebody who just got their printer last week to somebody who's been printing for years, and everything in between. And then the goal was all different types of printers. Everybody's using different types of resins, right? Different colors, different brands, different whatever. So we run it through months of testing. They're just posting their results, posting, is it working? Are they happy? All of it was done with the sole purpose of being simple, right? It was not done with the sole purpose of putting out the best exposure. It was done with the sole purpose of like, okay, here are your results. Do you understand them? Without me saying, well, do this, do this, do this. Here are your results. Do you understand them? And they go, yeah. Okay. Now that you say, yeah, what do you need to do to get the right results? And they go, I need to turn exposure up because X, Y, and Z. I was like, that's exactly it. Do it and come back. And so the results were across the board. Everybody's like, this is great. This is so easy to read. This is fantastic. And I was like, okay, I feel comfortable. We're ready to release. We release. And then all of a sudden it goes out to, instead of 10 people, it goes out to 1,000 people. And now the test group is much, much larger. And so then we start getting people who are like, why did it do this? And we go, well, we haven't seen that in testing. We had a small group. So come on the server, let's talk about it. And then we've been going through months and months of like people showing us things that happened that we never accounted for or didn't know, didn't understand. And then all of a sudden the cones kind of stop working for some people. And I'm like, okay, we need to look at this. Like, what's happening? Like, I'm intrigued. I'm not disappointed. You didn't do something wrong. Let's talk about it. What happened? What are you doing? Why isn't it working? And over that process of learning, I'm starting to realize that and this is hard to say, but it's like, to be fair, I have to like be honest about this. Mm-hmm. The cones are not, they can be, but are not a great calibration tool. The cones are a fantastic measure of resin quality. And this is the weirdest thing that I've come to learn. You can have any resin. I'm going to use Z-Mud because Z-Mud universally is sort of like looked down upon as a really low quality resin.
Yeah, there've been some comments about it so far.
more than it. Yeah. So it's like you get what you pay for when it comes to this stuff. You get the printer you pay for, you get the resin you pay for. If you pay $150 for a bottle of resin, you're probably going to have some good resin. Mm-hmm. You pay $16 for a bottle of resin, it's probably going to have some issues. So Z-Mud's a great example. Can Z-Mud print good detail? Yes, it absolutely can. It's possible. You can run the Amerilab City because there's no supports, there's no tensile strength. It can run the Amerilab City with great detail.
Right.
Can then you take that exposure and run it on the cones? No. And that's really weird, right? I didn't think that at the beginning. I was like, it holds or it doesn't hold. But what we've come to learn over the last few months is that Z-Mud doesn't have the strength mechanically to do what it needs to do at that detail, at that level of exposure. And what we're really testing with the cones is mechanical properties, right? There's sort of like an optical property, an aesthetic property from these other calibration parts. But what we're doing with the cones is testing a mechanical property. If I connect with this much resin, will it print this much cone? If I connect with a little bit more, will it print more cone? And that's really what we're testing. What happened is
it's that cross-sectional area between it's that little bit of straight between the two cones, right?
That's correct. Okay. Yeah. And each cone has a different size connection. So those have been like precisely tuned so that between the failure cone, the last failure cone and the first success cone, that is our tolerance. Not everybody will get the exact same, but we're going to get real close within that tolerance. What happened was that I didn't realize at the time is I was using a good resin. And so when I was printing these cones, I was finding a sweet spot between good detail and good mechanical properties. And then everybody in my test group was using Elegoo, they're using Soriatec. They were using pretty good resins that had good mechanical properties as well as good detail. And nobody in my group was using Z-Mud. And so it's like we had sort of this false, like everything's good. we did all of our testing. We've used dozens of different types of resins and colors and this and that, and we haven't really experienced any weirdness or failures that we couldn't account for.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes out to 1,000 people, and then all of a sudden people are like, why are the cones succeeding but my exposure is too high? It's like, well, what's happening is we're experiencing your resin has weaker strength, like tensile strength, and in order to overcome the tensile strength, we have to shoot the exposure up. And that's where I started to realize the cones can't be used as like a flat, like
It's
calibration.
It's about the
It's all
cones,
about the
man.
It can't be used as a flat calibration anymore. What we're really doing is, like, if you use frozen aqua like I do, it's going to calibrate your printer perfectly. If you're using, Soraya Navy Gray, it's going to calibrate perfectly because those two resins are of a good enough quality and have good enough properties that this is working out perfect.
Right.
But if you're using alternative resins or unknown resins or resins with lower tensile strength, you can't just put tenacious in a vat and print the cones. It won't work. It doesn't have the tensile strength necessary to run the mechanical properties of the cones. And so
we
version
did miss an
2,
opportunity here, Ty. I just want to point out. Ostrich says wearing my tinfoil cone right now. We should have prepared cone hats.
Oh man,
and,
we did.
And I think that was a big missed opportunity. That I'm a little pissed about this.
Maybe we can post process some red hats on or something.
Yeah, you're running a green screen. Fix this.
Yeah, I don't know if I can make that happen.
Not with that attitude, you can't.
Well, if we want to wait 5 minutes, I'll make it happen.
No, you're fine.
So that was like this is like a new discovery that I had never anticipated at the beginning. We went through a full set of processes, and then I start to see, no matter what calibration part is out there, there's going to be people who are like, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And there's going to be people out there who are like, this didn't work for me, this sucks, right?
Yep.
I take those, this didn't work for me, this sucks, very seriously, because I really want to fix things. Like a part of all of this process is too many people, too many opinions, not enough like fact. There's no standard, right? Everybody's got like what they think is best. And so we're all sort of like, you're over here, I'm over here, you're over here, I'm over here. And we all need to be on the same page where we understand like our results are similar enough that we can all account for the same thing. That's very hard to accomplish. And that's what I was trying to do with the cones. So that being said, I got with, I'm not sure if you're familiar, and if you're not, you should correct yourself, but Denny's Wang.
Yes.
Some people are not familiar with Denny's. And if I were to be fair to say, there are probably very few human beings on the planet who know as much as Dennis. Hopefully I pronounced it right. When it comes to resin printing, that guy has tested and experimented. And if you haven't found his channel, go look him up on YouTube.
Especially if you're into resin, clearly.
If you're into resin, he's extraordinarily smart. And he actually produced, and this is weird, you've heard of comics stealing jokes, and then they say they came up with the ideas separately, but sort of like there's a term for it. I don't remember. So he and I had done the same thing. We had come up with a very similar idea, completely independent of each other. I had never talked to him, met him. He and I released our part around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
His part uses the same mechanical like measurement properties, but does it in a slightly different way. And mine does it in a more, let's say a more user-friendly way. And his is sort of like yes or no. Whereas the cones give you like a scale of how much yes or no.
I do like that, right? The cones, and I said this in like the marketing that I put out for this, it is the easiest to read and understand process out there. Like to the point of I'm in your Discord now, so I'm watching that Cones of Calibration channel, and people are posting photos, and it's normally Chris. Big shout out to Chris Catlett, by the way.
Of course,
is basically solely responsible for my Friday videos being as easy as they've gotten. Thanks, dude. And now a moderator in our chat, so if you act a fool, Chris is going to be, there to shut you up. But, he is there constantly saying, too much, too little, because he can just look at a photo. And if it doesn't require a macro lens or perfect lighting to understand it, then it's a good calibration test. Some of these, like the infinity style logo ones with, the sideways 8, so much of a pain in the ass to understand. The
Yeah.
Amerilabs Toontown, it's too damn small. And I've
That,
got good eyes. I don't need glasses or anything like that. It's too damn small.
so that to be fair, when we put out the cones, there were complaints that it took too long to print. And
Oh,
we
piss
I
off.
know, I get it. So here's my argument. A little bit. It's no different. It's the same height as that Amerilabs city. I call it the Amerilab city, but whatever. It's the same height. So it's like we were okay with it before, but we're not okay with it now. And so here's the thing, regardless of whether or not you use the cones or that or the Anycubic one, there are plenty out there. And Danny had made a video outlining all of them. I think that might be where you were introduced to the cones.
Probably
Maybe.
that would make sense. Because I run on the business model of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So
Me too.
I am fairly certain I am overexposing on the Soraya Gray.
Okay.
And I was supposed to have some ready for this video, but these past few days have gotten away from me, and I got really into doing some design work for a client, so it never happened.
So it didn't. That's all right.
I can share my screen and show the Lychee Slicer file with the cones in it. It has not made it onto the printer yet. So that is absolutely my fault. But I do think we should do a video on it. Maybe that'll happen.
I hope so. And I hope two things. I hope it works great for you, proving that I'm amazing at what I do.
You'll know if it doesn't. Don't worry.
Also, anytime something comes up that is new information, it just helps me work towards making it better in the future. It's a problem. All of this is a problem. Exposure is a problem. Calibration is a problem. It's a problem for everyone who has a printer, who has resin, period. I want to solve that problem. It doesn't matter how or when or whatever. If the cones is a terrible idea, it turns out, I don't think it is. But if it is, then they're going to go away and we're going to come in with a new one. And we're going to try to solve this problem so that we stop, so we can move forward. We can enjoy our printing and not struggle and have the frustration.
For me, I would love to see, and again, this is someone who's never printed the cones, well, I've done it for casting resin, but again, they're destroyed. Never printed it in regular resin.
Sure.
Because Soraya Tech cast, again, magic.
It's a different beast.
It's magic. Yeah. And don't even start with me on the resins that actually have real wax in them, because that is way they get a film on them like pudding. But either way, I would love to see the cones also with some stuff that I can measure. So
yes.
So a cube on the side that should be precisely 3 millimeters, one that is external, one that is internal. Just add it, but of course at some point you start adding too much shit to it and it stops being useful.
Stops being simple.
For someone that wants to do more engineering stuff with resin and doesn't necessarily I've got Soraya Tech Blue.
Okay.
Soraya Tech Blue, which the most offensive resin I've ever smelled. It is so offensive. It is a bitch to print. It is incredibly temperature sensitive, but I definitely don't have a prototype of something I'm working on in there proving that it works. And it is unreasonably non-dimensionally stable.
Right.
And currently in my office, it is 82.7 degrees Fahrenheit and 41% ambient humidity, which I live in Tampa, Florida. That's pretty damn
41% is pretty low.
For Tampa, outside it rained all yesterday, so it's got to be at least 85% ambient outside. But our temperature is relatively consistent, and I still find that blue is a problem. And for me, I want to do more engineering resins. That's actually why the mayor makes stuff that was sent over. And that was sent to me for disclosure. I did not pay for it. It's for review, all that. It'll be in the video. That stuff is interesting to me because they're saying it is better than blue without the trouble that blue has. And I don't care if it's double the cost, right? I sit in the business end of, I don't care if the resin's $200 a liter. Here, this little bottle of resin right here. Little bottle of resin, $250 US. Oh, sorry, $400. It's 250 milliliters. It is Vario Smile Crown Resin. It is FDA certified. I can make actual crowns out of this.
That's the thing is on your end, you need that. The expense is necessary. The cones may not be appropriate for that. because it was really made for the hobbyist in mind. I have no idea, and I've never had it tested. If you ever feel like having a really like expensive set of cones and you want to show me the results, like let me know.
I'm gonna do them with the Mayor Make stuff.
I need to know the results.
Vario Smile actually doesn't certify any Elegoo printers. Hilariously, I have a Mono X, and that's one of their certified printers. And so they just provide ready to go profiles that are certified to work. I firmly believe they're overexposing, but when the crown plus supports are less than a milliliter, do you really care?
Probably not.
You don't. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You don't care. The resin, it's not designed for permanent. It could be, right? If you didn't eat anything solid, something that could shatter it, that crown could be in your mouth for the rest of your life. But it is designed to be something that can be printed in a dentist office before you leave as a alternative to how they CNC mill them now.
So like a temporary, or like.
Exactly. And you could do, they're so tiny, you could do, I think I fit 250 or maybe it was close to 300 teeth on one platform. That's a weird quote. I'm definitely that's not going to get clipped.
Out of context, the aliens are going to come down and see that.
To 300. Yeah, no. But I don't care about the cost of the resin as long as it is dimensionally accurate. And that would, if that is something that you're working on in the V2, I would love to be involved somehow, because that is a big concern for me.
Absolutely.
When a buddy of mine was looking at buying a Form 2 back when the Form 2 was brand new. And so I contacted Form Labs. We reached out. We had them run a test print. It was 8 inches long.
Okay.
And so it was 2 prints that were bonded, but they sent it to us unbonded so we could, get a measurement. It was 40 thousandths of an inch too long, which is like unacceptably large.
Yeah.
40 thousandths of an inch is, so 5 thousandths of an inch is roughly 0.1 millimeters. Okay. So 40 thousandths of an inch is 8/10 of a millimeter.
Wow.
Right? Is that good math? Someone will correct me, I'm sure.
It's exceptionally small, but if by their standards,
you could tell the circles weren't circular. You could tell. No, 40 thousandths was way too out of spec. They were claiming spec to be 2 to 3 thousandths per meter.
Okay, yeah. And so when you're talking those numbers, that's huge. Like in my world, like that's so unbelievably small compared to like the faults I see in like normal prints, but their expectation is like extraordinarily high like precision.
It's like we just did a piece for a client. I had to modify it to be FDM printable because they didn't have time for resin, but ultimately I would have preferred it to be in resin. It is a functional prototype that needs to be dimensionally accurate. I have traditionally never had luck with dimensional accuracy on resin. You have a Z elongation problem that deals with the peel forces. There are ways to deal with this inside of software, but for me to be able to test it quickly along with testing my exposure at the same time would be incredibly valuable. As I see Ty looking at another screen, writing down, we should probably have something to test dimensional accuracy.
No, I actually, so that's something I was going to get into. I'm setting up something I can show you in a lychee slicer. But okay, so this exact topic came up recently. I brought it up on our test server. We have a new batch of test printers. I want to shout out Chris again. He was in the first test print group. Like that's how I met Chris Catlin.
This is of no surprise to me.
Yeah, he was in the first, so he has had a hand in this, and he's that's why he's so good at answering the questions. He was there almost from the beginning. So anyway, so I bring it up in our new group, and I have a couple of guys who are very invested. They're putting in a lot of time. If you're on our Discord server, Bearded Gamer, McWeasel, these guys are like putting in serious time, like testing. I was like, we need to know what we didn't know before. We never tested anti-aliasing. How does it affect it? We didn't test lift speeds. How does that affect it? We didn't get into some other details that maybe we should have in the first round. And now we're trying to make sure that we're testing those things. In that process, I brought up a topic and I was like, listen, we need to have a talk about this, right? I'm realizing that these new elements that I hadn't accounted for in the past exist, and it would be dumb of me to like ignore them for the sake of just saying that I built a great part. Like, I don't want to just say I did it right the first time when I didn't. And so that comes into like tensile strength is now the topic, right? Can the resin be strong enough to hold and keep good detail? So then the topic is the cones of calibration almost can't be called that anymore. The cones don't necessarily calibrate. What they indicate is good mechanical properties of resin. So what we're now measuring is resin quality. So it's now a measure of resin quality, and we're trying to figure out how can we best represent that, right? So the only way we can do that is by combining dimensional accuracy with mechanical accuracy, or mechanical property.
Cones of strength, that's Chris.
The cones of strength, right? So it would be the idea is I want to add, and I haven't done this yet. This is only recent discussion, and we are sort of like playing with ideas about how can we best present this the simplest way and the most understandable way. I want to add something that's measurable, and I want to add something with detail. The problem with something with detail is that it's still subjective. Like, we can look at it, we can view it differently. Like, I think it's underexposed, I think it's slightly overexposed, I think it's perfect. But if the goal is print this first, right? Print this 1 centimeter cube first, measure it with calipers, make sure that you're printing it perfectly at 1 centimeter, right? As close as whatever tolerance you want. If you want a 1/10 of a millimeter, great. If you wanted a 100th, 1000th, you print it to whatever accuracy you deem fit. Now print the cones. If your cones are failing, that means you have weak mechanical properties. You're not going to be able to print pre-supported miniatures with dimensional accuracy. It's impossible to do that. And that has a lot to do with the sort of like the established level of pre-support work. Like, what are the settings that we're finding work with the most people?
Right.
In order for you to print with dimensional accuracy with a lower strength resin, it will require you to learn how to do your own supports, and then do supports that supplement the lack of strength, whether that be bigger tips or more supports. I'm always in favor of more supports with smaller tips. But you will be able to gauge your ability to print pre-supported work using version 2 is the idea, right? If you print your cube and it comes out within your tolerance, 0.1 millimeters or whatever, and then you print the cones and the cones are dead on, what you're finding out is that you have a resin of an appropriate quality to go forth and print miniatures without having to do much more. And so I have to take it from like a calibration part. It can still be used in that way, to a resin quality meter, where we're determining whether or not your resin is capable or appropriate for printing. And this is all, 3D printing is vast. I print in tabletop RPG or like tabletop wargaming is what I focus on. That's what my community is mostly about. And so I know it's not fair to like cut out the rest, but it's what I know best. And so I can only produce what I know as opposed to the stuff I don't know. So for miniatures, or for that style of printing, the idea is that now that what you have purchased, the resin you have purchased, is appropriate to have no problems or struggles going forward with mine, Atlas's, Greg's, anybody's pre-support work, that it's probably going to work well for you out the gate with good detail and everything. So the problem with all of this is there's more than one problem, but these printers are not as precise as we would like to think, right? It's all like computer controlled and all of this stuff. Well, there can be variances in the resin. Even if you have Soraya Navy Gray and another bottle of Soraya Navy Gray, there will inevitably be some chemical difference between the two, sometimes more, sometimes less, but they'll never be exactly the same. So with that in and of itself, it creates problems trying to figure out why this bottle of resin worked, but that bottle didn't. Well, that bottle of resin sat on a shelf for a year, and this one was produced last month. Well, there's going to be a difference between the two mechanically.
I have been saving a bottle of resin for over 3 years now for this
Really?
exact test. Yes.
I can't wait. You have to show me the results. Like
Yeah.
I will shout it from the rooftop. So that's one problem, but that's one problem that newcomers don't understand yet. Printer to printer. I have two Sonic Mini 4K sitting next to each other. One of them has a 1 second more exposure time than the other. Right. That has to do with UV power or UV output, voltage output from the drivers, right?
Yeah.
Most new users don't understand that not every printer is identical, even if they have the same brand and model name on them. So there are a lot of variables involved. And the only thing we can do is try to create that standard where we can dial all these variables into one little circle. Right? Even if you have this resin and this printer, and I have the same resin and printer, we're getting different results. That's okay. Let's get ourselves into the same circle so that we can predict the outcome from there. And the most we'll be able to do from here with the cones is tell you whether or not the resin you're using is capable of being inside of that circle.
Right.
As it turns out, Z-Mud is not. And it's not that I'm pooping on Z-Mud. It's just Z-Mud is not an appropriate resin to print pre-supported work.
No, if it's apparently not an appropriate resin to do jack shit with.
To pretty much do anything. But if you bought 4 bottles, I think I was talking to somebody, if you bought 4 bottles of Z-Mud resin and now you're invested in it and you have a ton of it, that's okay. You can use it, but you won't be able to print pre-supported models. I have classes on YouTube. You can go watch to learn how to do pre-supports. You can learn a lot from them. You are going to have to learn how to support your own miniatures, and you're going to have to learn to support them for Z-Mud because it's got weaker properties. You're going to have to do some of the footwork yourself. You saved yourself money, but cost yourself time, which is always how it works, right?
Don't even get, I don't want to get started in that too much. I want to back up a little bit here. We had a kind of a question from Ostrike. They don't have experience with resin printing, so they said, if peel forces are an issue, can you use a raft of supports to reduce the peel forces? I have no idea what I'm talking about. And so I want to give it from my perspective, then I want to hear it from yours. So bear with me here. But so with resin printing, everything is normally supported. With FDM, you print right on the build plate. With resin, you technically can too, but I don't recommend it because you'll deal with some elephant's foot problems. Lychee's working on fixing it, yada, yada, complicated, and such. But you're already using a raft when you're dealing with support. So your parts are off of the build plate. Let me grab, I've got random resin pieces here. So it's a tricycle that we did for a client. This is a spare part of one of them. And you can see that no part of this tricycle touches the build plate. There is a raft, right? So there's a raft going around it. This is before I found the triangular way that Lychee does it. So at me later. I even think this one was even done with Prusa Slicer. This piece is so old. And it's not about the peel forces for a raft. It's about it's about how many pixels that you have on the screen that are exposed. The more cross-sectional area per layer, the higher that peel force is. What happens is every single time the light turns off, the printer rips the part off of the FEP. Quite literally, you can hear it go. That's how I know if my printers are succeeding or not, because I can hear them. Because pausing and
snaps back down and hits like a drum. It peels and the FEP flexes and then snaps off. And it's like, you hear that little noise, you're like, the FEP let go. Like, that's good.
Yep.
Like, that's a good sound.
It's when you don't hear it, you're like, shit, what's happening? And it might be because you had such a low cross-sectional area that there's not enough force. But when you're inevitably ripping something off of a piece of plastic, you're going to have it extend ever so slightly. And when you deal with compounding error, so let's say it is a 5 micron expansion, but your part is 1,000 layers, right? You're now dealing with 5,000 microns, otherwise known as 5 millimeters, which is a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot of change. And so I know, like, the Preform from Formlabs, they now actually have an algorithm that adjusts your layer height based on the cross-sectional area of your part. And it is completely automated. You don't get to touch it. It just works. But those printers are $5,000. And they're closed source. Well, I guess even cheap resin printers are closed source too. The Atlas one is one of the few that the Athena board is one of the few open source resin boards out there. But all right, so that's my understanding. Did I get right on this, or?
I think, yeah, as far as what you're saying, as far as elongation over the Z, like absolutely. It's just pull forces. Like the resin, the harder the resin, the less of that I imagine you'll see. The more flexible the resin, the more of that I imagine you'll see. I've not tested that, but just like conventional logic would be like, if it's a stiffer, more brittle, hard resin, you might see it stretch less because it's got less elasticity. But those resins are really brittle. So if you're printing anything you might accidentally drop or need some sort of like impact durability, it's like you can't have both. You can't have hard resin and flexible. It can't be both things. So, but yeah, no, that's exactly why we see that elongation.
I would like to see more printers utilizing the VAT tip method that Form 1 Plus used and now the Prusa SL1S uses, because as the VAT is tipping down, the build plate is coming up. So it's a gradual peel rather than a rip. And when you look at like the Jupiter, the Frozen Sonic Mega 8K, and some of these other monstrous printers, those peel forces you can likely measure in pounds.
I would imagine,
or kilos.
Easily.
And that is frightening to me, because it means the dimensional accuracy is out the window.
There are printers now that are just surfacing. I can't remember the name, but they are projecting from the top down into resin. And there's no FEP.
All the high-end ones do this. All the high-end resin printers do this.
That's how they get that better dimensional accuracy, is there's no physics being applied to the part. It just comes up to the top of the resin. They run their layer, that drops down, brings up a new layer. Then they just nothing being stretched or pulled. Hopefully that's the future, right? Like hopefully, because that eliminates multiple problems for regular hobbyists, which is I ripped a hole in my FEP and now my printer's full of resin. It solves that. Like there's no FEP to rip a hole in.
We literally just went over this on Friday. Yeah. And of course, it was Chris that sent me the photo of a Saturn that just leaked resin all into it. And his solution was clean the lenses, cure the rest of it, move on.
Be done. Yeah, it doesn't hurt the electronics, I don't think. Like as long as it's not on any moving parts and the lenses are still clean. Yeah, I think you're good. But
I do prefer the VAT method. Or like where you're printing down, so your array of light, normally it's going to have to be a laser at that point, is above, shining down. I know Uncle Jesse reviewed a printer like that. The big concern for me comes down to cost, right? Sure. So the optics basically stay the same. However, the amount of resin you need all of a sudden goes through the roof. Because you must build the entire build plate to the Z. Yep.
Yeah. But once you have that initial cost done, let's say over a couple of years, companies like yours and mine, where I have 20 printers running, and I'm sure you have a huge number of printers, over time, I have to replace the screen on all of my printers. Those screens are not particularly cheap, especially on these bigger ones. Whereas those the DLP projection printers, a 10 times longer lifespan than I don't know what the cost on those though, but you might
higher,
be
right. Yeah, you're looking at,
is it 10 times higher?
It's double.
Okay, so it's 2 times higher, but for 10 times longer lifespan. So over time cost is like negated, but your initial investment is just so much higher to get into.
Here's the way I look at this. These resin printers, if they are less than $500, they are disposable.
Sure. Yeah.
They are disposable. And when they break their screens, they get put onto a shelf. And then any local staff get access to that shelf.
Oh,
and I'll even give them the parts they need to fix it. I don't want to take the time. Literally, I've got a broken OG Mars that we're gonna put a mono screen on, because you can do that on the old school ones. But I'm not gonna film that video. I will be in that video, but one of our staff members is gonna be doing it, because he's gonna take the printer with him when he's done. Because I don't want it.
Right.
Even for the mini printers out there, the people are doing it as a hobby. At some point, your time is so valuable that taking 2 hours to change a screen just doesn't pay.
It's not cost effective or time effective, which time is money. So cost effective, but
right.
So speaking of time, I pulled this up and I got pulled away from it. I want to show you guys version 2 since people are asking. And then just know that version 2's not been released because it's not ready. It's still in testing. We're trying to do more adequate testing, make sure everything is more appropriate. Our understanding is stronger. The results are easier. So let me swap screens here. Are you ready? Here it is. Dun, 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 dun. So here's version 2 of the cones. So I realized that we can cut about 35% off the height.
Mm-hmm.
So people complaining about if you're printing at 50 microns on a mono printer, you're looking at somewhere between 40 minutes to an hour print time, depending on your settings. So we were able to cut that down by 35%. And I brought up Denny's earlier because I contacted him and said, hey, we have similar ideas. Would you be interested in coming into our test print server and giving your insights, like your expertise on this? And he said, yeah, absolutely. So he joined the test print server. He looked at our old design. He's like, there's problems here, here, and here. And so one of those problems was he was saying the corners on the original cones is harder on the FEP sheet when you're printing them. And he said the pull forces can be lessened by curving the edge
Adding
there.
a fillet instead.
Mm-hmm. And so I was like, yep, that makes total sense. I didn't think of that. He indicated that this center column creates unnecessary wear on the FEP because that layer is being printed over and over and over in the exact same spot, layer by layer. So I minimized the amount of points. Right. And I was like, yep, excellent. He said that the base of this doesn't need to be as thick. I was like, absolutely. That makes total sense. It doesn't need to be as thick. So we shortened it up. I was never happy with, and anybody who's printed it will know that this failure side, this word will squish. You know, it says failure because you saw the STL, but I was just never happy with the result.
Why does it squish?
Well, what happens is on the success side is these are essentially supports. And when they succeed, the roof is held up by the 5 supports. On the failure side, when these all fail, the roof is held up by nothing but itself. And so for a few layers, it sort of has to pick itself up and that bottom squishes.
Gotcha.
So I went ahead and altered the way that it's legible. There was another complaint. I'm getting older. My eyesight is not as good as it used to be. I can't read what's on the side. I said, okay, I'm going to make the letters bigger and they're going to stick out and they're going to be more legible to read.
Right.
We did have also some reports that chunks on certain resins, and we haven't 100% narrowed down the problem, but certain resins, like a failure cone will actually rip an entire hole in the roof. And so you'll still have bits in the vat, which was what we were trying to prevent. And so I looked at it and it is not 100%, but our success rate is much higher on the people who are representing that by curving the roof of this and giving more layers to be picking up the error than before. So these are the improvements we've been making. Also one error that I made because I was figuring things out is you see this connection here between the 2 cones.
Flat surface.
That flat surface. I don't believe that it's working. So there exists some level of success there. But that flat surface always bothered me. And even on the largest one, it's a flat surface in the opposite direction.
Of course it is.
And so on the new cones, I've adjusted the way that surface is handled.
They've been necked to the right size.
On all cones. So subtle improvements. It prints faster. It causes less wear on the FEP. It pulls easier off the bottom of the FEP. There were people who needed a raft in order for it to be adhered to the build plate. Mm-hmm. So I am actively with a team of people working to improve this because I do want it to help set a new standard. I want it to solve problems for people.
Right.
I don't know how many people, and if you see the YouTube channel and you go through the comments where people are like, thank you so much. I was ready to throw out my printer. I was ready to just get rid of it. Like I have been struggling so much to figure this out, but having tried this and finally having positive results has fixed my love or like interest in this hobby. And I'm ready to like move forward. I want that for everybody. And I want it to be as easy and simple and just concise as it can be. And so that's version 2, the They're still cones. But the method that we go about evaluating our calibration may change. It won't just be the cones, because your resin may be different and it may not have the properties necessary. So we're going to improve that aspect of it too. Give you something to measure. And what we're discussing, can we do it all in one print, or can we do it, or do we have to do it over multiple prints? And one thing I meant to say earlier when we were talking about print time, where people were complaining it takes too long to print. This is something I can't stress enough. It is imperative to your success in 3D printing and resin that you do this right. The more times you fail, the longer it will take you to get it right.
It's true.
So take that time now and get it right the first time. If it takes you 5 hours, you got to print this thing 5 times to get it right. Take the 5 hours. It's not a lot of resin. You're not using a lot of material. Take the time to do it right now. Like carpenters, measure twice, cut once, right? It's like calibrate twice so that you only have to print once, right? Get it right now. Take the time. If this thing took 2 hours to print, but it did the job, you should do that. Like that should be an acceptable amount of time. Right. So I want to tell everybody, whether you use this part, another part, don't rush it. You might find a good setting on one of the community sheets, but probably not. And the reason for that is there are too many variables that they don't account for, and you can't account for their level of knowledge or experience. It worked for them. It doesn't mean it'll work for you. Printers are different. Resins are different. Temperature. If you don't know this, you need to know that temperature is a
big deal.
Can change everything. 10 degrees in a room change between printing during the day and a cold night will fail. It'll fail, and you won't understand it because you didn't know.
Because when you wake up and you find the failed print, it's going to be the same temperatures as before you went to sleep.
Yeah. And so logic is I don't understand what's going on. You didn't realize it dropped 10 degrees in the room. So,
and based on my knowledge of Facebook, your filament's wet.
That you're right. That's it. Yeah. Relevel.
I'm overdue for a joke.
Relevel. That's the key. So take your time, understand, right? One thing I complain about that I haven't had time to fix, let's say on my classes on YouTube, those are raw classes from Twitch. I haven't edited them. I don't have a lot of spare time, and I'm not great at video editing.
We pay a video editor for that exact reason.
I need to, but that's money, but
yep.
Worth it when I can get to it, I will. But I talk a lot. I go on tangents. I answer questions that are not necessarily relevant to the topic that we were discussing in the class. Mm-hmm. And so I know those classes they're 2-hour classes, and maybe an hour and a half of those class is what you needed to know, and half an hour you're just going to have to sit through. I would put forth to you that it's worth taking the 2 hours to watch the whole class, because it's worth knowing what's going on ahead of time before you get frustrated, before you have no clue. And then you go on Facebook, you get 10 different answers. You know what I mean? It's take the time, do the calibration, take the time, watch the class, learn everything first, so that you go forth with knowledge. For one, the best lesson I can teach anybody watching, get used to failure. Get used to it. It is part of 3D printing. Yes. It sucks. It's terrible. FDM failures. You printed 17 hours and then a layer skip. After a while, you start to realize it's just what happens. Sometimes it just happens.
It doesn't happen much anymore, but
you get better at it.
I'm using nicer printers.
But it just happens. And if you get used to it, accept that it's part of the process. Don't let it frustrate you. And this is cliche, but it's literally in printing. I think this is one of the most true statements. Every failure is just a lesson on what you did wrong or what went wrong. You have to look at the failure, evaluate it, think about it, what could have happened. That's what took place with the cones. A lot of failures took place. It forced me to go, how is this possible? What could even have taken place for that? Right. And then in that process, from the day I thought of the cones till now, I thought, oh, this is going to be a great calibration part. And now I'm thinking this is going to be a great resin quality part, right? It's completely changed because I've had to think so much critically about what failures took place and why. You can do that for yourself. And that process, you're going to fail a dozen times. And then after that, you're going to be like, oh, that's it. I figured it
How
out.
was I so stupid?
Right.
Every
And then,
time.
and it's like,
Every
there are
time.
only so many things you can learn from a class or from us teaching or from us helping you troubleshoot. And some of those things can only be learned through failure. And that's something I talk to people about with learning supports, right? I can't tell you how many supports to place on an object that has so much surface area. I can't quantify those things. The reason I know it is because I failed it 100 times. And now I know what it's like not to fail it. And so I'll tell you like, oh, that's going to need 6 supports. And you're going to say why? And I'll be like, I don't know how to tell you why.
It just
You can trust me and trust my experience. Yeah.
You get,
or that's just it.
It's crazy how you just kind of learn over the years of what works, what doesn't. It's like when I first watched, and again, I've only been in your Discord for a little bit. So when I first watched Charo Zuck, Idle Hams, he does all of Fotis's pre-supporting. When I first watched it, I'm like, wait, you can do mini supports inside of Lychee Slicer? Boom, mind was blown. I watched how he did it. I understood the method, and he did a very good job of explaining it. Truth be told, I have not spent a lot of time looking at resin for printing in general. I will just go with whatever automatic supports are generated and send it. Verify that it looks good in UV tools, clean it up if it doesn't, but then I just send it to the printer, because ultimately most of what we do just needs to look pretty. It doesn't need to be dimensionally accurate. Right. But seeing how pros tend to do their auto sporting, I think I've popped into a couple of your live streams here and there. I get busy, so I don't pay attention as much as I probably should. But seeing how pros do it opened up my eyes to, oh, okay, I can do this a little bit differently. And then I get an order for 150 rings and decide somebody else is going to get paid to do this.
That's all right.
Yeah.
It's so here's the thing about our method at TableFlip Foundry for doing pre-supports. I don't believe in gatekeeping the knowledge, right? The whole goal behind the cones is let's make the community better at this, because a better community is going to make better products going to drive the market, right? Let's educate people on how to do all of it. How do you calibrate your printer? But furthermore, how do you support your thing that goes against what I do, right? Everybody supporting their own models means potentially less pre-support work for me. But the key is exactly what you just said, is it's time consuming and tedious. It's not the most fun work to do. And so what my goal is, let's educate everybody, let's make them understand. And when they don't feel like doing it, we're here for you. If you want to do it better, or you wanted to like on a high level professional like job where we're keeping track of lines and seams and warp and all of that stuff, we're here for that. But if you are an artist, new artists coming to Patreon who are just starting, they have less than 100 subscribers, they're making a couple $100s a month, they can't afford to go to a company like mine and pay the money that they're making.
Wait a minute. You said couple hundred subscribers making a couple $100 a month?
less than 100 subscribers. Like 30 subscribers is $300 a month at $10, right?
A Patreon. Yeah. That you're talking about YouTube. I'm like, you have no idea how little YouTube makes.
Patreon.
Okay, got you.
Where you're an artist, you're trying to make a Patreon, you're trying to get some monthly income, but you're just starting. The word hasn't gotten out yet.
3D Musketeers.
And so it's like
3D Musketeers.
Say that again. Say it.
Something patreon.com/3D Musketeers.
There you go. Absolutely.
Do you have your own Patreon to plug?
I don't. But
I don't.
The problem is I don't make a product. I support other people's products. And so I want to share something at the end before we go. But those artists, they need their work pre-supported to be competitive in the market. But an artist who's great at ZBrush may not necessarily be great at 3D printing, because they put all of their effort learning to sculpt, and it takes a lot of effort to learn how to 3D print too. Some of them are fantastic. Some of them may struggle with that, and they could use that help. I would rather, instead of charge them to do their pre-supports for them, I would rather teach them how to do them right, so that they can get a foothold on the market. And then when they're sick and tired of doing it and they have enough money, I sure hope they choose me for their service. All I do is save people time. I can do it really well. I've done it thousands and thousands and thousands of times. So I probably do it better than a lot of people, but I just save time. I want people to learn. I want them to improve. watch the classes. I need to do another class. I'll do a class next week, but like take the class, learn. You can do it yourself. All of this stuff is learnable. You don't have to be a genius or you don't have to be extraordinarily like intelligent. You just have to go through it, learn it, practice. Like it's not rocket science. It's just something you have to learn.
It's patience, which a lot of people that are just starting in the industry do not possess, unfortunately.
Yeah, they expect it to be magic. They expect it to be done by computers.
Yep. Like I've got a buddy.
Now, let's put that to rest. Like it's not magic.
It's not. And I got a buddy, bless his heart, who loves 3D printing. His father got him into it, but does not have the patience for it and said, I refuse to buy a printer until Apple makes one, because when Apple makes a 3D printer, it's just going to work. Said, I don't care about the price. I just need it to work. He's been struggling with a row stock Max V2, a Delta printer,
okay, yeah,
which are incredibly complicated until you get them set up. Once they're set up and running, they're beautiful printers to run. They're fast. They're efficient. He won't touch resin with a 10-foot pole, but he doesn't need to. He's got big CNC machines that'll hit, sub 2,000ths of an inch accuracy.
Yeah.
But, I showed him a Prusa. He's like, oh man, but I wish it was bigger. So he's going to get a Prusa XL.
I want one so bad.
I've got my pre-order in for like 11 on all the settings
I want one so bad.
Dude, it's a $200 pre-order. Just go put it in. You're not going to get it until at least a year from now with how many people did their pre-orders.
I know. It's just the like I won't go on this huge tangent. But some of the stuff they're doing that they're bringing like individually heatable sections on a build plate to prevent warp.
Amazing.
Like that's like, so if you're going to talk about getting as close to like, just make it work. Like I don't have to do anything. I don't have to tinker. I don't have to build. Just make it work. Like that printer, the XL, is probably the closest we've got so far, I think.
I mean, this new Bamboo Labs X1 Carbon is supposed to be like that. We weren't cool enough to get one to review, so outside of like the videos that I've seen on it, I don't really have much of an opinion other than it's a Kickstarter. Be careful. It does look cool. I don't think it's LiDAR. I'm fairly certain it's an optical sensor, but either way, like I have real LiDAR. iPhones have crappy LiDAR. My LiDAR scanner was $60,000. So you can't tell me you're getting accuracy better than my $60,000 LiDAR scanner.
That's a stretch.
You can't do it for that money. Is there maybe, because it is light-based and that's why they're calling it LiDAR? Maybe. Again, not certain. But I think that printer is part of the movement away from cheap. And don't get me wrong, I love cheap resin printers because they're not really removing any of the benefits, features that you get on a larger printer. Right. So if you're removing features, like let's look at like the Prusa Mark 3S is my industry standard for sub $1,000 kit printer. Right? Compare that to an Ender 3 and look at all the things that Creality has removed from it. Now they have the Ender 3 S1 Pro XYZ, whatever bullshit name they have for it. And they've gone down this route of, okay, maybe we can start adding price to it. Bamboo Labs said, F this, we're going to start with a premium product. We're going to charge a relatively premium price, and it's going to bring to the table features that nobody has seen outside of like the Voron and Rat Rig community. And I think this is the start of the prosumer revolution for desktop 3D printing. And I'd like to see something similar come out of resin. So in your opinion, what are features that you think are missing from these relatively affordable resin printers that you'd like to see, and how much are those features worth to you?
Okay. All right. So I am constantly full of ideas. Like, how can I improve something that exists? I may not be the guy to make it, but I have some thoughts. So there exists a system in a resin printer that is very similar to a system in an FDM printer, but you have to be very loosey-goosey about it. So let's talk resin viscosity for a second, right? A higher viscosity resin should allow more light absorption or light penetration, right? A thicker resin won't penetrate, light won't penetrate as easily or quickly. So I would say typically thicker resins require more exposure time. You might get more detail out of a thicker resin because you have more precisely controlled penetration. But a thinner resin usually will print faster and usually an acceptably level of detail. A resin will become thinner when it's warm. So we talk a lot about warming resins. How do we get, like, don't take cold resin, throw it in your vat and expect a good exposure time.
Right.
So there are people playing around with vat heaters, right? And that's so that you can maintain a constant temperature, which is really important, fluctuating temperatures, right? But also a little bit higher temperature. I keep my print room at 85 degrees, right? Because that higher temperature is going to create a thinner viscosity in the resin, and that resin.
You should just live in Florida, unless you like paying $300 or more a month for power. Your room is going to be that hot. Like, my air conditioning is on right now, and it went up. Everything went up a little bit, but 82.9, 46% ambient.
And then you're not running any of those printers behind you.
No, nothing is running. Yeah.
If you were running all those little heaters, like, it'd be a sweaty room right now.
In the summer, it will top easily mid-90s in here.
That's brutal.
But I also don't run the air conditioning during the day because I'm the only one here. Most of our staff are remote.
I couldn't fathom that. I would be sweating, just pouring sweat if I were there right now.
You get used to it over time.
I bet.
And don't even get me started when I try to dry the room. So we have, like, I've turned off the dehumidifiers because it almost doubled my power bill just in dehumidification. But we would easily sit at about 105 to 110 in this room.
Humidity?
During the summer. No. Degrees.
Fahrenheit. Nope. Can't do it.
But you're sub 20% ambient. So you don't sweat because the sweat is evaporating off of you faster than you can sweat, right?
That makes sense.
And, I've got a dump so I can dump all the water outside. And I just said, forget this. I'm going to vacuum bag all the filament that matters and prove to people that it doesn't actually matter.
That big of a difference. So as far, sorry to answer your question. So that temperature thing is important for resin. We get better quality prints out of a higher temperature resin. The problem with that is that higher temperatures are detrimental to LCD screens. So it's this battle between, like, we want better prints, so we want higher temperatures for the resin. We want longer print, like, lifespans on the LCD screens. So we can't have both, or can we? So I would, and this is a weird idea, but I would love to see an under screen cooler that cools the screen and an above screen heater that heats the resin.
Guess who does the under screen cooler?
Who?
Prusa. The SL1S has a fan that cools the screen.
That cools the screen.
Correct.
So that's a heat break, right?
Yep.
That's exactly what that is. We need there to be a heat break between the FEP and the screen so that we can have longer lifespans on the screens. And I've thought of it like, have you ever gone in a bathroom and seen one of those, what's the company that makes vacuums?
Dyson. The Dyson hand dryers.
The hand blade.
That are one of the most unsanitary ways to dry your hand. That is a rant for another day.
That is. But that blade of air that they make is very thin and very powerful. If you were to make a Dyson blade under a screen, that could lengthen lifespan for a printer and lowering cost. That's one thing I could see.
But how expensive are the screens? Like, when you look at like a Jupiter size screen, fine. But like, so think of it for a Saturn are like $80.
They are, but not. So let's say I have, okay. So we're going to have to separate two things out. As a business, our view of like cost is a little different than like somebody who saved up $400 to get their first printer.
That's fair.
$100 screen might be like, it's not comfortable. Right.
I've only ever had one screen break because of time, and it was an LCD screen. All the other ones are broken because I've accidentally dropped VATs on them. Or dropped build plates onto them.
User.
Like, I've never had a Saturn kill a screen. None of you assholes better die on me. I'm like, because they're right over there. Because like, when you start talking about them, they know and they're gonna die.
They hear it.
That's why I have spares.
I have a spare for my Saturn. I haven't burned out my Saturn screen yet, but I'm on my second or third screens on my Sonic Mini 4Ks, and those screens are still $110, $120. The smaller 4K screens cost more because they're harder to manufacture, the smaller pixels than
Right.
the larger screens. Like my E10, I'm about to put an 8K screen on my E10. That 8K kit is $600. The
Jesus.
replacement for the screen is different because that kit comes with a new board and all that stuff. But still, it's going to
Right.
be a $200 screen. And if I were to run 3 or 4 of those, I could be looking at $1,000 month if they all decided to go. So it's like if we can extend 2,000 hours is sort of like the air quotes for how long they last. Some last longer, some last shorter, but it's way more than the RGBs. But if we, and that was the main problem with the RGBs failing so early, their red, green, and blue pixels would collect more UV light, right? That's why they're a lot slower, but they would also build in heat because they were retaining all of those light waves in those the three colors and causing more heat, and they would die after 500 hours. If they were cooled better, they could last 2,000 hours just like the monos, but they don't, and the liquid crystal degrades over that time. So that's one thing I'd love to see. Another one that I would really like to see is like more readily available. We're starting to see printers come with them. Actually two things, but they could be the same thing. I print very often, but sometimes I'll take a day off. When I take a day off and then I go back into my print farm, I have to mix every single vat in my print farm. So it's like an hour draining all of the resins, shaking everything up, putting back. I can mix it in the thing, but I'm a little. I know. But
use a spatula, silicone. Use silicone.
The silicone spatula was something I was recently introduced to, and I don't know why I hadn't. I have been using the plastic
makeup brushes, silicone makeup brushes because they're smaller.
Those are great. That sounds great. Yeah. But let's say you use Soraya. I tried Soraya Tech Navy Gray, the fast Navy Gray. Mm-hmm. It separates so quickly, and it requires a huge amount of mixing.
It does. We don't have the Navy Gray. We have the fast gray. Same deal. The gray sinks right to the bottom.
And so the Aqua 4K gray does, but the color doesn't change. And oftentimes for my business, I have to do photography of our test prints for artists. And when the colors all sort of like white, powdery or white, and then blue here, and I have to really, really mix them. What I think could be done, and this is sort of an idea that spawned from a video that Danny had shown, like using a peristaltic pump.
You know who he shouted out in that video, right?
Was that you?
That was me.
That was you.
Yes.
So a system that both simultaneously measured the amount of resin in the vat and kept it full, but constantly pumped resin in and out of the vat while the build plate was lifting. Pump a couple of milliliters of resin out of the vat, put a couple milliliters in so that we can constantly be mixing resin so that I don't have to go in and spend an hour. The resin is already mixed. There's never separation. Something that could do that would be.
We should be talking off stream. So that's part of that's the upgrade to the product that I'm working on. We'll have a peristaltic pump that will because that is something that anybody could do. So I don't really care if I'm open about that specific part of it. But yeah, there will be an external peristaltic pump that is designed for businesses because you can only put one type of resin in it because you'll never get the pump clean. Right. So unless you're going to pump it full of alcohol, then put resin into it to change colors of resin, you're using one color of resin.
Right.
But we came up with this with Synthetic Ephemera, who was a guest on the podcast, who had this idea as well. I said, well, what she wanted to get a pump. I said, well, what about a peristaltic pump where the pump does not touch anything? Yeah. It's rollers across tubing. That's all that it is.
Yeah.
The big thing is just dealing with the space constraint. I couldn't find a way to make it fit inside of the printer, so it has to be external.
It's workable though. You put it next to a printer, you might have to, if I were to put it on like a Saturn, I might have to Dremel like a couple little things in the.
Yes, you're going to have to do that
just to get tubes in.
Oh, okay.
Or it could come up from the bottom. We won't get too deep. I could rattle off ideas that I've been rolling around in the back of my head. The key is, and here's the thing, is somebody has to make it. So these are ideas that anybody can do, but somebody has to manufacture it. So soon as you make that, I'll be shouting it from the rooftops.
We'll
I'll be your first customer. for sure.
But yeah, I agree. Some sort of a pump system would be good because no manufacturers do that. I know,
Yeah.
like when you deal with the big vats, and like Chris has said that you can do like an inch of resin that floats on glycerin. That's the cheater way to do it. The real way to do it is to fill the entire like container with resin. That's how the big boys do it.
Yeah.
And then they put a like a stir bar in the bottom that will just stir up the whole vat
Yeah.
every couple hundred layers. It'll stop, pull the part out, mix up the whole vat, put it all back in, and let it roll again.
That's really cool. Yeah. I've heard of some more expensive ones where they have a wiper that it'll lift up, it'll wipe across the FEP and then layer back down. I don't remember the name of the printer, and I didn't understand when it was being explained to me, like why that would take place. But now, you just learn more and more. And I was like, okay, I can see how that physical motion through the vat, each layer would help keep the resin mixed, help keep the, the quality on the FEP, like the right way. If there's failures, it may be able to detect a failure and stop the print. If you had a little like squeegee that went across the FEP, and then when it disrupted the squeegee, like when you have a pancake stuck to the FEP, if the squeegee could detect a disruption as it went across and stop your print, you could save resin.
The Form 2 and I think the Form 3 might have it, but they've got a wiper that goes across that's used to mix the resin. You'd have to use some sort of closed loop stepper system to detect a spike in amperage. Again, a really cool idea, but implementation would be very, very complicated.
Cost would be
out. Yeah, this would be something that you design, you make, you patent it, and you license it. So you license it to a printer manufacturer that would then close source it themselves and pay you a royalty. That, in terms of product development, that is how that way goes, because there's no easy way to do it on an open source route, because every single vat is different. That's why I love the vat heaters, but every single friggin' vat is different.
Right.
Even the vat from the Saturn 1 or the Saturn 2 is different, which is ridiculous.
That's a little sad. I don't like that. What I really liked, and they're more, it's like Prusa. This is how I look at Prusa. Prusa makes a very high quality product for consumers, right? They can make products for businesses too, but there are more expensive printers out there that arguably could do more for like more and better and all that stuff. Like the Railcore is a few $1,000s. I think they can do really good stuff, but Prusa is like the Apple of 3D printing. They make a really quality product. They have a somewhat premium cost, and it's worth it when you do it. I'm not an Apple user, but I can recognize like when an entire case is made of like milled aluminum, you're talking a quality product, and they put that effort in. EPAX doesn't do that, like necessarily that high quality, all aluminum, all rigid, but EPAX printers are specifically designed to be upgraded. So their vat that they made for, let's say like the E10 is originally came out with an 8.9-inch screen, but they made the vat bigger, knowing that one day they were going to put out an upgrade for a 10-inch screen. You don't have to buy a new vat. You don't have to buy a new build plate. It was already designed with this in mind, and that you do not have to just buy their bigger printer. They just put out the upgrade kit. You get a bigger screen. You don't have to change the vat. You don't have to change the build plate. That is such a cool concept. And I don't think I've seen any other companies do that. They sort of treat their printers like obsolescence. Like that printer is old, put it aside, throw it away, sell it, whatever. Whereas EPAC said, no, we can see in the future a 10.1-inch 8K. We're going to make sure that we build this machine so that you can put that in, and we're going to sell you that.
And that is the value to EPACs. I don't have any EPACs printers. It is something that we looked at early on, but it did make more sense for us to go with Elegoo at the time, because
the cost is there. That's the little, it costs you a little more. It's like double the Saturn.
EPACs had just come out
with
a smaller printer, and they were 4 times the cost. They were in the $600 to $800 range, versus Elegoo Mars being $200. And while yes, there was some value to that, I think there was some nearsightedness from myself and quite a few others in the industry that I didn't really see printers. Like, to me, resin printers were for making jewelry. We bought them for making jewelry. We bought them for minis. I did not really foresee that we would be going to larger screen resin printers. I figured, all right, we're going to go maybe to a Saturn size, and that's it. And then we're going to start going to the vat style ones where, they print into gallons of resin.
Yeah.
But, there you go. There's a prediction coming out poorly that has really kind of modified the way that things go. Oh, speaking of Lychee Slicer, Alexandre is in here, former podcast
That's my guy
guest.
right there. Alex is the best.
He's great.
If you guys haven't got a chance to go over to their Discord, Alex is one of the most helpful people.
Dude, right?
Their whole team is great. I've talked to some other members of their team, but Alex is my go-to.
Damn, that was a Discord I forgot to post this into. Oh, that was a mistake.
I should have also.
Well, shit happens.
It is
but
what it is.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, some of the nicest guys over there, and I see the Cones over there all the time too, which is pretty cool. I can't keep up with their Discord. There's so many people in there, but I definitely do try. He's saying better resolution probably. For a long time, I looked at resolution as a misnomer, saying there's not much of a difference between 4K and 8K on an Elegoo Mars sized screen, because at some point the freaking pixels get so small it's a waste of time. The light bleed that you're going to get is going to account for more inaccuracy than you will get from going to 4K to 8K. Turns out I'm kind of wrong on that. You do get better looking parts, but you need macro lenses, you need microscopes, you need, a jeweler's loop to see the difference. And from my perspective, I'm not a tabletop gamer because I don't need another expensive hobby.
When you paint a miniature, you lose that. Like, it's diminishing returns for sure.
Right.
You lose the detail you got going from 4K to 8K just by priming a miniature. So I think like we've probably come to the point where like we'll probably all hit 8K, and then that's probably we're going to stop until the printers get big, right? The bigger the printer, the bigger the pixel size. A Mars size or a Sonic, the Sonic Mini 8K sized printer is going to have way better detail than a Sonic Mega 8K.
Oh, right, because that's pixel size.
Yeah, so that's where we're going to start seeing 16K one day or whatever comes out next, only on the bigger ones. But I think we've sort of hit that plateau where it's like when Apple put out their Retina display. The Retina display was called the Retina display because your retinas can no longer detect the difference between pixels anymore. I think we're quickly approaching that point, and then these companies are going to, after the revolution of resolution, I should hashtag that, right? After that has stopped, we're going to start seeing these companies come out with new features more than just more detail. And I can't wait for that because we're real close, I think.
Ostrike makes a point of, when you look at larger parts, resolution does start to matter. And Chris was saying it's not about resolution, it's about pixel size, stating 100%. That the ePax 10-inch 8K has smaller pixels than a Sonic Mini 4K. So that's true, right? We look at pixel density, that's pixels per inch or pixels per centimeter. And when you look at doing like helmets, big cosplay parts, there is massive value to having a higher resolution, larger screen printer. I just also look at it and say, God, if I drop a build plate on that, oh man.
Yeah. Build plate on an 8K 12-inch screen is just painful.
That's why I'm kind of glad I'm not like cool enough to be part of the Elegoo. Like, we reached out to Elegoo to be like a brand ambassador, partner, whatever. They're like, yeah, until you have 10,000 subscribers, just don't even bother. I'm like, okay.
I always wondered how that worked. Like, when it comes to like being so like social and visible in public, like at what point will manufacturers want to reach out to you? And
we've only had 2 manufacturers reach out to us, and we just crossed 5,000 subscribers yesterday.
That's amazing.
Oh my God. It was so May 29th of last year is when we hit 1,000. And I was really hoping that we were going to hit it on May 29th. It was June 4th.
But still, that's a huge amount. If in your first year you got 1,000, but in your second year you got 4.
Well, okay.
That's great
we
growth.
really started taking YouTube seriously March 16th. By May 29th, we had 1,000, but we had 2 or 3 videos go pretty crazy, like 250 subscribers from one video in 24 hours.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But that was definitely not 3D print. It was a Cricut related video where I called out a company for doing dumb shit. It got picked up by a big It got picked up by a 500,000 subscriber channel. I was on their live stream about it. We got a bunch of subscribers that way.
That's cool.
But growing a YouTube channel is a lot more work than people think. And it's why, like, you know, the term influencer is thrown around, you know, pretty loosely these days. I think it's a terrible term and I don't want to see it happen. However, yeah, it starts at like 5K. We just got a second company that reached out and said, hey, we'd like you to take a look at this machine. And they just sent it over. The mayor makes stuff, the resin that we got, that was because Zach Friedman, his channel doesn't fit with that. Zach and I are friends. He sent them to me. So that was not like they found us. It was because of a connection. You know, we've had Clayton of Uncle Jesse. We've had him on the podcast. We've had big people on the podcast. And I've talked to him off camera and he said, yeah, about 10K is where that starts to happen. And until then, and we've talked about this before, if you are trying to get out there as a content creator, whether you are creating minis, you are doing custom supports for people, you're doing this real cool calibration thing, it is about providing value to the companies. So somebody like Soraya Tech might reach out and say, hey, we really like the cones. We'd really love for you to show off our resin with them. What do you think? But that's because your stuff is really, really big at this point. When you're first starting, you could go to them and say, hey, I'd love to calibrate your resin with our new test print. Let me send you some samples. Let's talk about a way that we can work together for a mutually beneficial relationship. And for a company to send you a couple liters of resin to tune in is bupkis worth of cost to them. But to have pre-tuned profiles that exist for a certain amount of printers for their clients is way, way more valuable.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I considered, I don't know, down the road, who knows what will happen with the cones, if the cones will stay the cones or turn into something else or evolve. Like I said, the end goal is whatever is best for the whole community is what we're going to lead into. So this is the start. We'll see how it goes. But I would love to be able to coordinate with manufacturers so that we can be testing against products that they're putting out.
Or slicers. One of the big reasons that I still keep Super Slicer on my computer is because it has built-in calibration files.
Oh,
that come pre-done. So, like, you know, it'll do a temp tower, but it's all the code is right there and it's done.
Handled for you.
Right. So, like, really cool. We just did a video on the diamond nozzle. Like, this nozzle is tipped with diamond.
Right. Okay? Yeah.
Put it on a ring for the bit in the video, because if you like it, then you should put a ring on it. And I there was supposed to be a bit where I proposed to Amber, but she was out of town. It was a complete missed opportunity. It's my fault. But like this, you have to run a temp tower with. So I'm going to use Super Slicer to generate it, and that's how I'm going to print it.
Awesome. Yeah.
And I know that Lychee has some, but getting the cones inside Lychee would be huge.
I can't. Okay, so I can't.
Not saying there's
anything.
People from Lychee listening right now.
There are.
Maybe they should make that connection. I'm just saying.
I can. So here's the most I can say. You guys can read between the lines. I have presented.
No, you don't have to. He said, spoiler, we are working with them right now on validated profiles.
I asked for a way for us to be able to add our own whatever calibration part you want, but add it to the library built in a Lychee. And there might have been some affirmative response to that. So I can't say too much because I promised them I wouldn't. I don't know what I can and can't say. I don't want to say too much, but it sounds like there might be some possibility. There might be some.
That to me is where the benefit comes in. More companies are starting to package Lychee Slicer because they realize Chichi Box is hot garbage. They can't say that. I can, because nobody pays me for this. And you're not going to be able to win my approval without multiple zeros before the decimal point. Okay. At a certain point, everyone has a price. For me, it's much higher than most people would think, but ultimately it comes down to usability. And if I can go into a slicer and say, I really want to test my exposure, click it, boom, the file comes down. Oh, what printer do you have? Click it from a list. I've got an Elegoo Saturn. What resin are you running? Oh, I'm running this. Is it doped with anything? Because that matters so much.
That's important.
Okay, I've got about a 10 to 15%. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
Print, validate, and then I can update the profile and it will work great. So for me, it's that reducing that barrier to entry And I think the cones really do this,
That's the
right?
goal. I
It's
hope.
easy to read. It's simple. I did see that the cones are only 9.81 millimeters tall right now. Please change that to a solid number.
The V2.
Yeah, the V2 is
Okay.
9.81.
I
Please
Yeah, I
go to
can look
like
into
9.75 or 10 or 9.5 because again, I want to measure Z elongation and I'm going to have to
Okay.
measure with some really really fine stuff here.
Yeah, fair enough. I can make that adjustment and round it up. I hadn't considered that when I did it, so I'll put that in my notes, and it's just a small little edit in Fusion, so no big deal on that.
Yep. And I love that kind of thing. I love seeing where, all right, and I would absolutely do a video on this, right? Going through that process and kind of showing people what it's like to start off, because that's the big thing that we see in these industries, right? How do you get started? How do you level a build plate? How do you unclog a
Yeah.
nozzle? These are all videos that are coming, but I just want to cover more cool stuff first.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and to me, there's value in making it easier for first timers to get involved. It's like light burn for lasers. If you have a
Mhm.
laser and you're not using light burn, you either have never heard of it and I'm sorry, but you're welcome, or you have a laser
Yeah.
that doesn't work with it and I'm sorry. Because light burn has made my 80-watt generic black and red laser from useless to useful. And when that process becomes as easy as using like Inkscape or something easier than that, it makes the barrier to entry is removed. And had I known about the cones or had the cones even been around when
Yeah.
I first got into resin printing, I would do it. And we talked off camera a bit that I'm fairly confident I'm running 2.65 seconds on my Saturn with fast gray with a 10 to 20% dope of tenacious. I'm
Yeah.
fairly certain I'm overexposing. But if it works, it works. But I would like to get to a point where the supports do just kind of fall off. There's very little damage left on the part, so we can get better quality prints for people.
Absolutely. Yeah. At the very least, what I can say is, regardless of detail, right? Because now we've established that like detail and like mechanical properties are
Yep.
not don't necessarily go hand in hand. If I can say very confidently, if you print the cones, regardless of the detail, anything that you print that our company has pre-supported is going to work exactly like that. It's going to come off. You don't need heat. You don't need cutters. There's going to be very little marks, mostly because that's my experience. I design the cones based on my experience. My experience is as a pre-supporter.
Yep.
So they definitely go hand in hand. So if you're, and you can go to our website, and where I'm doing some updates, but you'll be able to see everybody that we do pre-supports for. You can know that if you subscribe to any of them or have purchased any of their products and you haven't used the cones, go use the cones, dial in the cones, and then print their products, and your experience front to back is going to be like flawless. Like
Mm-hmm.
the quality of the pre-supports, the way it all lays out is just going to work really well for you. The only catch is if you're using a lower quality resin, you may have to expose higher and you might lose detail, but that's not something I can fix for you. It's something you're going to have to go purchase a better resin or do your own supports or whatever the case is. So
Yep. Yep.
but that's the goal. I want it easy. I want you to buy your printer today, print the cones tomorrow, and by 2 days from now, you're going to be just running minis, happy as a clam, comfortable with it. And then you can continue your learning process from there. But let's get you printing and happy before the frustration kicks in and you quit or get mad or break something.
And look, failures are part of it. That's why people should tag us on all the social media so we can put them in the Print Fix Friday series, because it's not every now and then I make fun of people because they've just done bonehead things, but a lot of times it's looking at why the failure occurs. Because ultimately, if we have a failure, we don't post an update as to why it occurred and how we fixed it, the next person that finds it gets no value out of that. And
Right.
it becomes this constant era of people complaining about failure. And when the cones are the way they are, where there's almost no way to have random bits end up in your resin, it's very, very clean, it's a quick print, and it's not all that large, so you're using small amounts of resin. To me, that's where the cones win compared to other systems. And watching Danny go through all the different calibration files, God, it was rough because they are. I should go grab. I can see the Toontown in purple Soraya Tech cast resin, and because the resin is so soft, you can't even tell if it's good or not. But I know
Right.
when I did the cones, it worked. You know, I had to change some more settings, but when I did the cones, it worked fine. And then
Yeah.
they melted because the resin melts at a very, very, very low temperature. But you know, again, the cones to me kind of solve that. I don't know how to calibrate my resin printer. If the cones could also have a way to calibrate dimensional accuracy, which again, because I guess it's 12 by 24 by
Yeah.
9.81 currently.
The 9.81 is the only part that you're going to have a hard time with, but the rest, it's like just get calipers. You know how big it is in the slicer. You can
You and
easily
I
do it.
both know you can decrease that to 9.5 or increase
I
it
will.
to
I'll
9,
do it.
you know.
I'll do it. I just have to do it like specifically so that it doesn't affect the cone. The cones are very, very specific
Right.
as far as how fast they get bigger, how long they are, how much they print. Like those have all just taken gobs and gobs of time to get sorted out. But yeah, I'll sort the roof out. I'll make it easier.
And that's just, and like for me, from a business standpoint, dude, that means I can hit accuracies. I
Yeah,
will use like proper micrometers rather than a digital caliper, so I
sure.
can really kind of tune it in, because getting that is nice. Also having a nice flat surface to put calipers on.
Yeah,
So flat surfaces on all four sides where you can measure with calipers. Once we start getting into models that do more than one thing and that do them all well, we start looking at really, really good value in the industry.
yeah,
Um, Now, final question for me, because we are over 2 hours at this
yeah,
point,
yeah, yeah,
which I think we both expected.
yeah.
But for people that want to get started in kind of working in the similar industry, right? So you got into doing printing on Etsy. Now you're doing stuff for the community. Um, what you know, like what kind of advice can you give
What
them?
can it? Okay. I'm by no means am an expert in this topic, but here's what I've learned, and that might be helpful. And this might be hard to do at this point. So I've watched certain artists in the tabletop community excel and certain artists struggle, and I've tried to look at why that is. Like these artists that are struggling, I don't think they should be, but they are. So what is it that's happening? So here's the advice I can give you for anybody trying to enter, whether it's tabletop RPG gaming or 3D printing and making money with 3D printing, or selling a shop on Etsy, or creating your own device to sell, or whatever the case is. This probably applies to all business. Is you have to look at the market. You have to look at how saturated the market is, and what are you bringing to the market that nobody else is bringing. So like on Etsy, I'm just printing miniatures. There's 100, 200, 300 businesses printing miniatures. Why am I doing okay? Well, I approach the way I do that slightly different than them. So I'm bringing something new to the Etsy market that other people are not doing. When it comes to pre-supports, I believe that I'm teaching classes, I'm educating, I'm trying to elevate the community, elevate the market. That's something I'm trying to bring with my work to the market, because I don't believe that's like fully done. People have, and I'm not saying they don't deserve credit for that. In fact, some of those people I learned from when I got started. But if you're going to try to start something new, you have to look at the market. Do I really want to engage making, let's say that the whole market makes goblins. Do I really want to make goblins again this month? Like, do I want to enter this goblin market with just another set of goblins? Or can I make something that the market doesn't have, that they need, that they're looking for? So you have to just evaluate what's happening, what's needed, what's missing, what's that little thing that people have missed. Or if you're going to do goblins, what are you bringing to the goblin market that nobody else has done yet? Right. So that's one of it. The other one, if you want to enter and do a business or enter a market, the hardest thing that I've had to overcome, and the hardest thing that I've seen people fail at entering, like starting a business or doing something, is just fucking do it. That's it. Just do it.
Yep.
Just get out there. Like, don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of failure. Assume you're going to fail and carry on anyway. That's the one thing that stops the most people in my experience, is they are just unwilling to take the leap, believe in themselves, believe in what they know and what they're willing to do. I'm willing to work harder than anybody else. I work 14 hours a day, almost 7 days a week consistently, because I'm willing to work harder than anybody else so that I can make my business work. Just take the leap. I had to quit my job in order to do this. And it's a huge, terrifying thing to dive into the unknown. But as romanticized as this is like, that's where life exists, right? Life, it doesn't exist in the mundane punching a clock. Life exists in the adventure you take, good, bad, otherwise, success, failure. You'll be able to look back on your life and be like, I gave it my best shot. Even if I didn't succeed, at least I tried. Regret is the worst thing in the world. So look for the opening in the market, come up with a creative idea that, and make it better than the next person, whatever it is they're doing. If you can improve it, and just grow a pair and do it. Don't talk about it. Don't dream about it. Just do it.
Alexandre says, no more goblins, more space cat pinups. I agree. I want more cat related stuff. Also, spoiler alert, we're going to be doing some really cool shit here pretty soon. We're going to do videos on all of this. We are going to start doing an entire series of post-apocalyptic vehicles.
Love it.
That are actually crash cars that I've high-end 3D scanned. We're going to shrink them down for resin printing. And guess who's going to be the one that's going to be doing the custom supports?
Who? Okay, if I could, before we go, I haven't really told anybody about it. I figure this is probably a good place. I mentioned earlier, like, why don't I have a Patreon? I don't have a Patreon because I'm not a sculptor. I don't make a product. I give out my information for free. But if you do like my classes, or you do like the cones, or you love our Discord server, which you can go to at our website, it's just tableflipfoundry.com. The Discord link is there. I do have a project we're releasing soon, and I've only shown a couple of people on the back end of our Discord, but I'd love to introduce anybody who's watching to it.
Look, if they're almost 2.5 hours into this thing, at this point, you can say whatever you want, because if they've listened this far, they think you're cool.
Know. So we have a mascot. His name is Puck. He's a little red dragonborn. If you're part of our community, you are very familiar with Puck. If you backed the Curious Critters of Whimsy Isle from Velrock Art, you're familiar with Puck. If you joined their painting contest, it was painting of Puck. He's been our mascot for a long time. I feel he's beloved in our community. And recently I decided that he needed friends. And so I went to our artist. Her name is Spider. She's on our server. Her name is actually Morgan. But and I said, hey, Puck needs friends. What do you think? And she says, I gotcha. And so she did a group of friends, and through a little bit of communication with a sculptor that's also Keaton, he and I are very good friends, so he comes up often. He is going to sculpt our set of Table Flip Foundry miniatures, and they look like this. So this is the Tales of Table Flip. This is the first chapter, and we call it What the Puck, and these are Puck's friends.
Love it.
So coming soon, I'm hoping July 1st, we're going to be releasing it.
Oh shit, real soon. Okay.
Real soon. We've got a few things to work out, but this is Puck, Albert, Fable, Corsi, Silva, and Delta. And we're going to make some miniatures of them. And if you wanted at any time just said, hey, I want to support Table Flip, this would be the way that you can do it. If you want to keep your eye open, head to our server. We'll post it on all of the places that it needs to be posted when the time comes. But we're working really hard to make it. Morgan is like slaving over the artwork, and she's just done a fantastic job. All of these characters are all like kind of Morgan's brainchild, and then we talked about it and hammered it out. So that's a project I got coming up to look out for.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Some advice that I have for newbies, other than the just do it, is don't be afraid to ask. Literally in every single YouTube video, we have a public email. It is youtube@3dmusketeers.com. It goes directly into my inbox. It does not go to anybody else. It goes directly into my inbox. So if you do want to come on the podcast, you can reach out there. You can also use podcast at 3dmusketeers.com. That goes to my inbox as well. But I want people that are, kind of feeling apprehensive about it just to reach out, right? Go find Discord communities that are into the same stuff you're into. Go join, be a part of the community, because doing this kind of thing alone, like Alex said, is absolutely the easiest way to fail. You need to find a community of people that can support you. And even if it's, you reach out to me and say, hey, I'm really into this, but I don't know what community to get into. Dude, I'll go on a Twitter and I'll ask, the 800, I only have like 800 Twitter followers, but I'll go on a social media and be like, hey, we're looking for a community for this. Who's got Discord servers? Right? That's the kind of stuff that we look for, right? We look for trying to help people. And if you join our Patreon at the $10 tier or higher, you get access to our Discord. It is a it's not a massive community, but it's a very tiny community of people, and it's all my team and a few people that support us on Patreon. So it's very, very much one-on-one. And often I am working on stuff that I can show off on live in that Discord server. We do hangouts every now and then, as well as, you get to see some of the things that I won't talk about on stream, that I will talk about, things that that we're working on privately. So find ways to support the creators that you like as well. Ty, you should definitely set up a buy me a coffee so people can
yeah,
kick
I
a
should do
couple of
that.
bucks to
I'll do
that
that.
creator fund, because
Yeah.
every now and then $5-10 here or there goes a long way into making your day a hell of a lot better. And it's crazy, because people don't understand what that looks like to content creators. To get a $5 tip, it means that someone recognized you and thought that your stuff was worth so much that they wanted to kick you a couple of bucks into that creator fund. And it's same thing with Patreon, right? If they like what you're doing, maybe you release some special pre-done miniatures a month. I don't know, or you offer a discount on your
Something.
services
Yeah.
for people that are subscribed to your Patreon for X amount of time. I support almost a dozen creators on Patreon with the money that we get from Patreon. I don't want to take any money from Patreon. I want to put it back out there into the community and make it better than it was. So always be looking at how you can help your fellow individual. Look at how you can, when you get to a point where you know what the hell you're doing, remember where you were 6 months ago, 1 year ago, 2 years ago. And you need to go find those people and hold their hand and walk them through the valley of shadow and death that is 3D printing. Because that's how we get more cool people, and we get less people that end up on the news. Well, for the wrong reasons, at least. But I can get into that rant all day long. Ty, thank you so much. Guys, go check out Table Flip Foundry. Links are in the show notes down below. And yeah, that's really all that we got. This has been a long one. We knew it was going to be a long one. Both Ty and I don't know how to shut the hell up, but that's fine. We had a great time. We hope you guys did too. As always, you can leave comments. Let us know what you want to hear next, who you want to hear next, and we'll make sure that Ty keeps an eye on your comments so he can reply to you all as well. But stay safe out there. Don't forget to call your loved ones. And as always, keep making awesome. Have a good one. Season 2, episode 39. We're getting close to the 100 mark, baby. We're getting close to the 100 mark. All right. See you guys later. Take care.